This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate third and final part of What If Fem Naruto became Kyuubi. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
When Naruko entered her house, she rolled her eyes at the sight of Kakashi reading his typical orange book while seated in a chair. She removed her sandals as she entered and then went to sit down next to Kakashi. Still reading his book, Kakashi inquired, "So how did the exam go?" Naruto sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Strange, but we passed the first test," he said. Knowing Ibiki's personality, Kakashi remarked, "I heard that he was the examiner. I hope he didn't cause too much emotional damage, he tends to do that. Maybe it's just me, but he didn't seem that bad. I was more worried about answering the impossible questions which turns out were a waste of time," Naruto grumbled. Kakashi turned a page and remarked, "Yeah, it is probably just you. I doubt they were a waste. Ibiki isn't one to do something without a reason." Before posing a question, Naruto said, "There was a reason, rather long one, but it still didn't do much. Hey Kakashi.ni, where is training ground 44? Looking at Naruto, Kakashi said, 44? So you were going there? It's on the west side of the village about a mile out, before returning to his reading. Naruto raised an eyebrow and said, "I guess you aren't going to say anything more, are you?" Naruto pouted when Kakashi said, "Nope, I don't want to ruin the surprise," to which Kakashi simply laughed. Naruto pouted, then yawned and went to bed. "That's no fun." "Well, night, I'm going to bed," she said. Kakashi said, "Night, you better enjoy the warm bed," which caused Naruto to turn around and raise an eyebrow. With a simple shrug, Naruto entered her room. "Would it be okay with you if I got up early tomorrow to try our new thing again?" As Naruto climbed into bed, he asked Kurama. Kurama answered, "Sure kid, but you've already finished it." Naruto told Kurama, "Yeah, I know, but I just want to be sure and try combining it with my K's no Yoroi." Kurama said, "Just don't try to break anything this time, will you?" Which caused Naruto to mumble that she wasn't at fault. Training Ground 44. The following day, Naruto deadpanned when she and her team arrived at Training Ground 44. "It's a forest, she said. "It's a freaky forest," Kuruko was informed by Sakura. Anko stood atop a big rock and yelled, "Right, listen up," drawing everyone's attention. "This is the location for your second exam, Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Death," Anko grinned. "This place has a 10-mile radius, and at the center of it is a large tower. There are 44 entrances to the training ground. The forest is filled with many large animals, bugs and plants, so you better watch yourselves," Anko said with a voice that frightened most. "Please, it's just a forest. I grew up in one," Naruto said, obviously not understanding the significance of the situation. When Naruto was done, she stopped the kunai before it could sever her by using her tail to catch it as it flew in her direction. With an arm wrapped around her shoulder, Anko was leaning on Naruto as she turned her head slightly. Anko licked her lips and said, "It's the ones like you that die first," which startled Naruto a little. Naruto grinned in response. "You know well enough that nothing in there will have the balls to come near me, let alone attack me." What she meant by that was a mystery to Sakura and Sasuke. According to Anko's charming voice, it's not your typical forest. Most humans don't even dare to enter the forest, which further confirmed Naruto's suspicion that this woman is insane. Naruto used her tail to return the kunai to Anko, saying, "And I'm not your typical ninja, and I'm not human, and everything in there knows it." Naruto said, "I'd keep this, but I won't need it," pointing to her fingers, which had nails that resembled claws. Anko pouted as she took and put away her kunai and then returned to the rock. "You are no fun," she said. Anko pulled out 2 scrolls, one brown with the kanji for earth and one white with the kanji for heaven. "Right, as I was saying, this place is filled with deadly things, and your goal is to get to the tower with these," he said. "Each team will only get one of these. Your objective is to reach the tower with an earth scroll and a heaven scroll. Naturally anything goes, so you will need to sign these. These papers are saying that we are not being held responsible for any deaths that may occur," Anko stated with a document in her other hand. "You will have 5 days to reach the tower. You will stay in there for the full time, so giving up won't do anything. If you fail to reach the tower in time with both scrolls and your entire team, you will fail. If a teammate is unable to reach the tower under their own means, you will fail," explained Anko. Anko added another rule. "You are not allowed to open the scrolls unless inside the tower." When someone said, "What happens if we do?" in a charming voice, Anko said, "Why don't you find out for yourself? I don't want to ruin the surprise," which alarmed a good number of people. As Naruto took a form and handed the stack of papers to the next individual, Enko said, after reading the form, go to the stand to sign and exchange your form for a scroll and report to your allocated starting point. After 10 minutes, Team 7 reported to Gate 33 after turning in their forms and receiving a heaven scroll. Gate 33 with an eye toward Naruto, Sasuke inquired, so what's the plan for this? Assuming that this was the best course of action, Naruto stated, well, I have two ideas. The first is head for the tower right away and wait to ambush someone, the other is to wait until nightfall and ambush a resting team before heading to the tower. Sasuke said, unless you smell another team, and Naruto nodded in agreement. I think we should head for the tower, Sasuke said. Naruto, will you take us to the tower so we can get there quicker? Asked Sakura. Sakura suggested, yeah, that's a good idea, and you can save your strength for when you need it, and Naruto nodded. The gates suddenly opened with a bang from the forest. Before both Narutos transformed into a fox, Naruto performed a bunshin. Before Naruto and the bunshin fled into the forest, Sakura climbed onto the original, while Sasuke climbed onto the original. In order to pick up sense to follow if she picked one up, Naruto only traveled about 30% of her normal speed on this particular occasion. Naruto stopped running about 4 miles into the forest, took a few sniffs, then moved around a little before taking a few more sniffs. As he and Sakura dismounted Naruto, Sasuke questioned, Naruto, do you smell something? As Naruto dispelled the bunshin, Sakura approached Naruto and Sasuke. Yes, I do. And it's heading right for us and has been for the last mile, Naruto said. Because they might be being followed, Team 7 went on high alert. A loud crashing sound was coming their way, Naruto heard. When she noticed a huge, powerful gust of wind coming their way, she gasped and acted swiftly. Before all 9 tails reached their full size, Naruto partially transformed into her Biju form and developed 4 tails. Naruto covered herself and her group with her tails, creating a huge dome. Sasuke and Sakura couldn't figure out what Naruto was doing. Naruto explained what was happening and said, I think it's an attack, before he grunted from the force of the blow. Naruto's tails shrank and 4 of them retreated back into her after she thought the potential attack had passed. As Naruto and her team surveyed the area, they noticed that some trees had been totally destroyed and that every tree in a straight line had been torn from the ground. Sasuke remarked, this had to have been an attack, after examining the damage. Naruto yelled, yes it is. Hey, come out, I know you were there, as she peered at several trees. A long-haired black ninja leapt to the ground. He was dressed similarly to the Atonin, but he wore a big purple rope as a belt around his waist. The ninja remarked, ho, you found me, I'm impressed. When Naruto saw the symbol, he said, I noticed you following us a mile back, and he realized that this was a Kusanin. Before snarling fiercely and preparing for battle, Naruto took a few more sniffs. After hearing Naruto growl like that, Sakura and Sasuke also prepared for a fight. Orochimaru, snarled Naruto. Orochimaru asked, revealing his true pale face as he peeled off his skin, Kukakuku, so you know who I am. Naruto snarled on, that is really gross. And yes, I know who you are. I remember your scent from the last time, as Sakura and Sasuke stiffened a little. Naruto whispered to them, Sasuke, Sakura formation E. Just as silently, Sasuke replied, I don't think this is a good idea, we are no match against him. Naruto softly replied, I know that, but he is clearly after us. We have to do something, to which Sasuke nodded. Sasuke inquired, why are you here? What do you want? Orochimaru responded, Kukuku. I am here for you and I want you, giving Sasuke a spooky glance that made him wince. What the fuck? Sorry, but I don't swing that way. Why would you want me? Sasuke responded. I don't want you for that, you imprudent child. You are the last Uchiha, so that makes you very valuable for my plans. What do you say, boy? Join me and I will give you power like no one else can. Power to kill your brother. Orochimaru aimed to get Sakura to look at. Sakura said, Sasuke, don't, in a voice that was a little frantic. Sasuke shot back, no, I don't need your help or your power, which caused Naruto to smile at him. In an attempt to incite Sasuke's wrath, Orochimaru said, no, don't you want to seek out revenge for what he did and the way you are now, you stand no chance against him? Over the past few weeks, Sasuke has been gradually letting go of his hatred, and he is grateful to Naruto for that. I do want revenge, but I have more important things on my mind and Itachi isn't one of them. And I know I don't stand a chance against him now, but who says I'm going after him right now? Sasuke responded. My Sasuke-kun is that. Looking at Sasuke with a proud smile, Naruto thought, I'm really proud of you. Orochimaru looked at Naruto and said, Ho? More important things you say? I wonder what will happen if they were to disappear, which caused Sasuke to freeze and become a little alarmed. Sasuke's fear of something happening to her was evident to Naruto. In an attempt to reassure Sasuke, Naruto approached him, put a hand on his shoulder, and gave him a gentle squeeze. Sasuke turned slightly to face Naruto and smiled at her. Sasuke seemed to relax a little, and Naruto gave him a little smile in return. She gave Orochimaru a stern, cold stare as she moved past Sasuke to stand in front of him. Orochimaru dismissed it casually as she watched Naruto and her teammates form a stance. Naruto said, You guys know what to do, and she nodded. He then charged at Orochimaru and swiftly reappeared in front of him. Naruto aimed to strike Orochimaru in the face by taking a straight left. The punch sailed past Orochimaru's face as he cocked his head away from Naruto. Leaning forward and extending her right foot out, Naruto gave a soft growl of frustration before drawing her arm back in and spinning in a clockwise direction. Naruto turned and kicked Orochimaru in the head. Orochimaru grinned as he ducked beneath the kick. Naruto sailed past Orochimaru and skidded to a stop a short distance behind him, staring at him. Orochimaru turned around and said, Not bad brat, if only it was someone other than me, Kukakuku, before he laughed near the end and grinned. In response, Naruto charged back in with a fierce determination, but when she noticed Sakura was gone, she grinned. As Naruto arrived at Orochimaru, she leapt to her feet and raised her left knee to his chin. Before having to duck to avoid Naruto's kick, Orochimaru leaned back slightly to avoid the attack. With her left knee still pressed against her chest, Naruto extended her right foot and rotated her body clockwise as her knee passed Orochimaru's chin. With her foot outstretched, Naruto performed a 360-degree spin in midair, sailing over Orochimaru's head, who simply ducked to avoid the kick. When Naruto hit the ground, she landed in a crouch and kept spinning in a clockwise direction while keeping her right foot out and her left knee against her chest. The low attack was aimed at sweeping Orochimaru's legs from under him, forcing him to jump over it. Naruto stood up on her left leg, pushed her knee against her chest, retracted her right foot, and continued to spin. After stopping herself from spinning by keeping her upper body parallel to the ground, Naruto turned to face Orochimaru. She then kicked out her right foot and struck Orochimaru in the chest with a forceful blow. Orochimaru was kicked in the chest and sent skidding back several meters after he had just touched down. Naruto yelled, Now Sasuke, as he performed 5 hand seals. Sasuke went through his own set of hand seals and grinned as he watched Naruto prepare a jutsu. Naruto exclaimed, Futon, Daitopa, and then let out a huge puff of wind. Soon after Naruto launched her attack, Sasuke yelled, Kaden, Gokakyu no Jutsu, and released his biggest fireball to date. Orochimaru found himself trapped between the two attacks as they collided. Sasuke's fire attack was fueled by Naruto's wind attack, which increased its intensity and sent the flames skyward. Only a black scorch mark remained on the ground where the two attacks struck after the fire from the attack swiftly subsided. Knowing that something like that wouldn't kill Orochimaru, Naruto remained vigilant. Sakura leapt from her treetop position and landed beside Sasuke. As the three searched for Orochimaru, Sasuke inquired, Did we get him? Naruto looked at her two teammates and thought, I need to get Sasuke and Sakura to the tower. Two bunchins that Naruto made ran to Sakura and Sasuke. There was no room for argument when the bunchins touched Sakura and Sasuke. Instead, they used a shunshin to remove them from the area. One of the bunchins recalled to Naruto that they were roughly 2 miles from the tower. As Orochimaru oozed out of a tree and solidified, he remarked, I will still reach him no matter how far he goes. After all, you still need a scroll to enter the tower. I sent my team away so I don't have to worry about them getting in the way and getting hurt, Naruto said, turning to look at the snake Sanin. Orochimaru laughed and said, Kukakuku, and you think you can take me alone, do you? Naruto said, We'll just have to find out, as he calmed. Naruto grinned and pulled out 2 kunais, one in each hand, saying, I won't win this fight in a battle of pure strength and speed, so I will be doing what I do best. As Orochimaru watched Naruto get ready to charge in, he asked, Kukuku, and what would that be? Naruto said, Why don't you find out for yourself? And then rushed in once more. Naruto threw one of the kunais at Orochimaru's head and the other one into the air in the direction of Orochimaru after cutting the distance in half. Both kunais weren't intended for Orochimaru, so he was a little perplexed. When Orochimaru's gaze shifted from the kunai that sailed past his head to her, Naruto grinned. The kunai instantly charged at Orochimaru after changing its shape into Naruto. It then dove to the ground, feet first, and slid in the direction of Orochimaru's feet. The original Naruto had just passed Orochimaru when the sliding Naruto struck him from behind, shocking him. Before lowering herself again and striking Orochimaru in the face with the back of her heel, the original Naruto lifted her right foot high enough to press her leg against her body. A tiny crater was created when Orochimaru's head struck the ground. Orochimaru's head, along with the rest of his body, splattered into mud rather than being turned into paste. Not long after, a second Naruto landed between the two ground-based Narutos. The newly landed Naruto exclaimed, "What the?" After giving a low growl, Naruto pushed the two bunchins away, leaving her foot where Orochimaru's head should have been. After removing her foot from the ground, she sniffed the air a few times to find Orochimaru. Naruto turned her head and saw another Orochimaru licking his lips and solidifying after leaking out of the tree. Orochimaru said, "Kukakuku. If only that was the original me. You are not the only one who likes to play find the original me," and Naruto growled low in response. Naruto glared back at Orochimaru. "You really are just a sly snake," he said. "Says the fox," Orochimaru retorted in a light-hearted tone. Then, cocking her left arm back and clenching her fist, Naruto charged back in. When Naruto got to Orochimaru, she smirked and pummeled his face with her fist, confusing him as he began to sidestep the blow. Suddenly, Naruto's arm transformed into a huge, red, furry arm. Naruto's enormous arm allowed her to connect her fist with Orochimaru's face, sending him hurtling through a number of trees. Before transforming her right arm into a gigantic red furry arm, Naruto disappeared and then resurfaced in Orochimaru's flight path. Before swinging it down and slamming Orochimaru in the face who had just arrived at Naruto, Naruto cupped her hands together and held them above her head. A miniature shockwave was created when the force of Naruto's attack forced air out and away from Naruto. A crater several times larger than Orochimaru's head was formed when his head struck the ground forcefully, face down. However, Naruto was perplexed by what transpired next as Orochimaru shriveled and lost his luster. After her arms stabilized, Naruto picked up the deflated Orochimaru and sniffed a few times in bewilderment. Stunned, Naruto said, "Smells like him, but what the fuck is this?" Naruto leapt back to avoid an attack from below while she was still holding the deflated Orochimaru. Then, deflated Orochimaru leapt to the air, his neck reaching beyond human reach. As his neck stabilized, Orochimaru fell to the ground. Naruto displayed a mixture of bewilderment, disgust, and awe despite not knowing how to respond to this. "Just what the hell are you?" frowned Naruto. "I could ask the same of you," Orochimaru said, unsure of Naruto's identity. In response, Naruto assumed a stance as he tried to come up with a solution. Naruto could tell that Orochimaru was more alert and cautious this time, even though he didn't adopt a stance. Orochimaru licked his lips and remarked, "I'll admit that it's been a long while since someone has made me get a bit serious. But as much as I would love to play, I have more important things which seek my attention," Orochimaru said. Naruto growled and said, "Leave Sasuke-kun alone. You will not touch him," as her eyes flashed red. Orochimaru said, "Kukakuku. Oh, don't worry, there is plenty of time, but for now it can wait," before vanishing into thin air and blending into the earth. Naruto took a few sniffs here and there and stayed vigilant for several minutes, before transforming into her fox form. She calmed down a little when she was unable to smell Orochimaru. Naruto soon picked up her team's scent and pursued it at almost full speed. Alongside Sakura and Sasuke, the tower is 2 miles away. Naruto could hear fighting just ahead of her as she approached her team. To find out what was happening, Naruto leapt into the air, changed into her human form, and landed on a tree branch. Naruto noticed that Sakura and Sasuke were interacting with a dozen ninjas who were all dressed alike. They were all dressed in gray full-body wetsuits, some with only their eyes showing and others with their mouths completely covered by a breathing mask. They were from Kirigakure, as Naruto could see from the symbol. From what Naruto could see, every ninja that Sasuke and Sakura struck changed into a liquid that resembled black ink and was swapped out for another ninja. As Naruto watched and looked for the original ninjas, this went on for a few more minutes. Finding the culprits didn't take Naruto long, and she smirked as she transformed into a fox. As the ninjas crouched behind a bush, watching their illusion wear Sasuke and Sakura out, Naruto crept up behind them. Naruto gave the 3 ninjas no opportunity to respond or strike back. Naruto struck each ninja on the back of the neck with a tail, rendering them unconscious. After transforming back into a human, Naruto pulled the unconscious ninjas along with her using her tails. Sakura and Sasuke were perplexed as to why the illusion vanished so abruptly, but they immediately became vigilant upon hearing the sound of leaves rustling behind them. Sakura and Sasuke refused to let their guard down when Naruto emerged grinning from behind a bush. Naruto threw 3 unconscious ninjas in front of her and let her tails wave idly from side to side behind her. "Did you really have a hard time with these guys?" she asked. "You should know what to say if you are Naruto," Sasuke retorted, maintaining his defensive posture. Naruto sighed and remarked, "A team now. A team tomorrow. A team for life." Sakura and Sasuke strolled up to Naruto, putting away their kunais as they relaxed. With a neutral expression, Sasuke inquired, "What happened with Orochimaru?" Naruto, who was unsure herself, answered, "I'm not totally sure, he sort of just left saying that there is plenty of time." Naruto approached a ninja and searched them, saying, "Sasuke-kun, help me search them for their scroll." When Sasuke didn't answer, Naruto looked up and saw that he was following instructions. When Naruto noticed that he was wearing his old expressionless face, she questioned what was wrong. Sasuke declared bluntly, "I found the scroll, but it's a heaven scroll," as he stood up holding the scroll. Right. We should keep it, apart from eliminating 2 teams we might need later," Naruto said, startled by Sasuke's tone of indifference. "We still need to find an earth scroll. We should head for the tower seeing as we are nearly there," Sasuke said, turning to face the tower in view. "Yay, I guess," Naruto said, flinching once more as she genuinely wondered what was happening. Naruto said, "Hey Sasuke?" in a voice that carried a hint of concern. Sasuke simply looked at Naruto in response. Looking down, unable to maintain eye contact with Sasuke's expressionless face, Naruto questioned, "What's wrong? Why you acting like your old self?" Sasuke answered, "Don't have time for this. This can wait till after this test," before leaving and making his way to the tower. Naruto simply gave a gentle nod in agreement before trailing Sakura and Sasuke. When she caught up, Naruto took the initiative and guided her group to the tower while searching for additional scents. As Team 7 arrived at the tower, they witnessed Shino, Kiba, and Hinata entering. They noticed that there were 2 doors leading into the tower, one next to the other. When Team 8 entered the tower so early in the test, Naruto was taken aback. After positioning themselves, Naruto and her group awaited the arrival of the next group at the tower. Finally, a team showed up just 3 hours later. The Konoha-based team was no more than 3 years Naruto and her team's senior. The signal to spring the trap was given by Naruto. Sakura tossed several kunais that were marked with explosives. To avoid the explosion, which never materialized, the ninjas were compelled to disperse. Why duds would be thrown baffled the 3 ninjas. The nearest ninja was swiftly knocked out from behind by Naruto, causing the other 2 to rush to their fallen comrade. They noticed a burning tag on the downed teammate's back. After reacting swiftly and removing the tag, one of them stepped on it and extinguished it. Sakura landed close to the ninjas after leaping from a tree. Sakura yelled, "I'm over here," to get the 2 ninjas' attention. One of the ninjas yelled, "You bitch, you'll pay for that," as he and his teammate charged in. They both swung at Sakura when they got there, striking her in the stomach and face. Sakura smirked before vanishing in a cloud of smoke, leaving the 2 ninjas perplexed. "What the?" exclaimed one of them, startled. Just behind them, Sasuke leapt from a tree and kicked the ninja on the left before circling the house and spinning clockwise. His teammate was knocked to the ground after the ninja flew into them. Only one of the ninjas remained to contend with after Sasuke knocked the others unconscious. While Sasuke gathered the final ninja, Sakura emerged from behind a bush and Naruto leapt down from a tree. The 2 of them approached the ninja who was still on the ground. Naruto grinned and said, "Give us your scrolls. You are outnumbered and outmatched," as Sasuke came back with the final ninja and positioned him close to his 2 teammates. The lone surviving ninja responded, "Here, take it, just let us go," as he extracted both of his teammates' scrolls from their back pouch. "Of course you can go. I'm not going to hurt or kill you," Naruto said, smiling softly as she took the scrolls and placed them in her backpack. The ninja was left to tend to his teammates as Team 7 made their way to the exit. Team 7 arrived at the door, opened it, and went inside the tower. They found themselves in a spacious, square room with 2 balconies on either side, as well as hallways above and below each balcony. There was a big poster on the wall in front of them. None of them understood the saying on the poster, and it appeared to be missing a word. This doesn't make sense and there is a word missing, Sakura remarked after reading the poster. Without heaven? Without earth? I think it has to do with the scrolls. Open them, said Sasuke. Before giving one to Sakura, Naruto pulled out a scroll depicting heaven and earth. They both opened them simultaneously. The kanji for person was surrounded by strange symbols inside the scroll. Sakura and Naruto read the scroll aloud and simultaneously asked, Jin, Hito? Both scrolls began to emit smoke, causing Naruto to drop it and Sakura to lose interest in holding it. A huge puff of smoke emerged from the scroll as it struck the ground. After the smoke cleared, Iruka was seen grinning. Iruka. Sensei? Naruto inquired, startled by his unexpected arrival. Iruka smiled and said, Hi, it's me. Well done, you passed the second exam. Yada! Exclaimed Naruto joyfully, while Sakura sighed with relief and Sasuke smiled slightly. Sakura pointed to the poster and said, Sensei, what does that mean, and there seems to be a word missing. Naruto stated, Who cares? We passed, without regard for the outcome. Iruka said, I am also here to explain that, while perspiring. This is the motto of the Chunin exam written by the Hokage. Sama, Iruka said. Motto? Inquired Naruto. Iruka pointed to the location of the missing word and said, Yes, motto. And the word that was on the scroll goes into the empty space. In this paragraph, earth represents the body while heaven represents the mind. If you lack heaven, seek wisdom, be prepared. If you lack earth, run in the fields, seek advantages. These rules will guide a person's extremes, Iruka said while reciting the passage. If you lack heaven, seek wisdom, be prepared. For example, if Naruto's weakness is her mind, she must gain knowledge and prepare for missions. Iruka's explanation caused Naruto to sigh and cross her arms, and Sakura to playfully stick her tongue out at her examples. If you lack earth, run in the fields, seek advantages. For example, if Sakura's weakness is her stamina, she should continue to train hard, Iruka said. Iruka concluded his explanation by saying, Missions will only become simple and safe when you have both heaven and earth. These 5 days test your abilities needed to become a Chunin. Before vanishing in a cloud of smoke and dust, Iruka remarked, You guys finished this test with plenty of time to spare. Unfortunately, you will have to remain in this tower until the end of the test. So use the next 5 days to relax and rest, you will need it. Sakura said, waving, I'm going to look around a bit, I'll meet you guys later, as she proceeded down the hallway. Sasuke remained expressionless as Naruto asked, Sasuke-kun, now that this part is over, can you please tell me what's wrong? Nothing is wrong, Naruto interrupted him by saying, Sasuke-kun, there is something wrong. Please tell me. Sasuke frowned and remarked, I am annoyed at what you did earlier today. A little perplexed, Naruto questioned, Huh? What I did? Sasuke raised his voice in exasperation and remarked, with Orochimaru. You used a shunshin to get us out, leaving you alone with that freak. What the hell were you thinking? Naruto answered sharply, raising her voice as well. He was after you. I'm not going to let that freak get to you, and you were in no position to fight. I could feel your hesitation, she said. Sasuke answered somewhat angrily before calming down toward the end. Of course I hesitated, he is a Sannin, Naruto. A Sannin. I hesitated when I heard what he wanted to do to you. I don't want to lose anyone else, especially you, he said. I know what he is, that's why I had to get you out and with his attention on me, replied Naruto. You used yourself as bait, what the hell were you thinking? I know you are strong, stronger than any other genin and most chunin in Konoha, but you can't take him by yourself. What happened to us doing this as a team no matter what? Sasuke said, cutting off Naruto and raising his once more. I know we said to do this as a team, but I had to hold back for fear of hurting you and Sakura. You would have been in the way. Sasuke interrupted Naruto in a fit of rage, saying, been in the way? So what, am I not strong enough for you now? I only get in the way? Do you really think so little of? It's not like that and you know it. He could and would have used Sakura or you, especially you, against me or use me against you. He is a sly son of bitch who has no conscience and will do anything to get what he wants, Naruto grumbled as she severed Sasuke. You being alone, there is any better? You could have been killed, Naruto, or who knows what. You sent us somewhere far off, which left me knowing that there was nothing I could do. That feeling of being helpless is the worst feeling, and you of all people should know that. Sasuke responded swiftly and nearly screamed at. Naruto answered, her eyes welling with tears. You could have also been killed if you remained there. Sorry for having to put you through that, but I'd rather give my own life than watch you die, she said. Sasuke yelled back, You're not the only one that feels that way. As the end drew near, Sasuke continued to yell, Naruto, you mean too much to me. I was worried sick about you. I couldn't even fight properly. If you die, especially knowing that I could have done something about it, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. When Naruto heard Sasuke say that and saw the tears in his eyes widened. Sasuke, I understand why you did it. If I were in your position, I might have done it myself. However, please don't do that again, Sasuke said quietly as he surprised Naruto by putting his arms around her. Naruto gently wrapped her arms and tails around Sasuke and said, Sasuke-kun, I apologize for causing you so much anxiety. My only concern was getting Sakura and you in particular to safety. Sasuke whispered back, I'm just glad that you're safe and alright, before stepping back and kissing Naruto on the forehead. Sasuke-kun, I want you to understand that I hold great and destructive power within me, and when I say go I mean go. I had to seriously hold back when you were around while I was fighting Shukaku, Naruto said as she gazed into Sasuke's. In response to Sasuke's question, you mean Kyuubi? Naruto nodded. Naruto began, what I meant by you being in the way I meant. Sasuke concluded for Naruto, you were concerned that we would be hurt. Yes. Naruto gently pulled Sasuke back into a tight embrace. I can't go all out with you or anyone else around without hurting or even killing them, she said. Sasuke said quietly, I understand Naru-chan, and he made a silent commitment to train hard so that he could be the one to defend Naruto and not have to back down when Naruto went all out. Naruto whispered, you know Sasuke-kun, I am really proud of you. You saying that you have more important things than going after Itachi made me really proud, expressing her deep pride in Sasuke. Thank you Naru-chan, thank you, Sasuke said as he gave Naruto a firm embrace. After 5 days, Team 7 unwinded over the course of the following 5 days as they awaited the test's conclusion. Gaara and his group were the first to reach the tower and make it through, Naruto found out. Naruto's team finished third, while Hinata's team came in second. Only 4 additional teams reached the tower during the 5 days. Asuma, Guy, and Kabuto are the 3 Konoha teams. The only Otogakure team that showed up last appeared to harbor resentment or some other animosity towards Sasuke. Currently, the 7 teams were arranged in rows within a spacious rectangular room that had balconies on both of its longer sides. A big statue of a ninja with their hands in the Hitsuji hand seal and their chest up stands in the front of the room. The Jonin instructors from each team stood in front of the statue. The Hokage is standing in front of them, accompanied by Ibiki, Iruka, and 2 additional ninjas that Naruto was unaware of. There is Anko in front of them, grinning. The Genin participants stood a few meters apart in front of Anko, facing the individuals ahead. The Hokage had just concluded his explanation of the Chunin exam's actual objective. The Chunin exams are actually meant to serve as a stand-in for war between allies. A second ninja appeared kneeling in front of the Hokage as he was about to explain what was going to happen. Naruto's hearing allowed her to hear the ninja's question, which was too quiet for the Genin to hear. The ninja rose and turned to face the Genin shortly after. The majority of the ninja's black hair was hidden by a Konoha headband. He appears sick and exhausted due to his black eyes and the thick, dark sleeping bags under them. He is dressed in a green utility jacket over his standard black Jonin uniform. With a cough in between, Hayate said, Hello, I'm Hayate. Before the third cough test begins, there is something I would like you to do. When Naruto saw this man looking rather ill, she thought, this guy doesn't look well, is he alright? Hayate shocked him by explaining, it's a preliminary for the third test. To decide who can participate in the main event. Shikamaru yelled, preliminary? What do you mean? Sakura shouted out as well, Sensei, I don't understand why aren't all of us here allowed to participate in the next test? Because the first and second test may have been too easy this year. We have too many people remaining. According to the rules of the Chunin exams, we must have a preliminary to reduce the numbers of participants for the third test, Hayate said. No way. Sakura said quietly, a little dejectedly. As the Hokage said. Earlier there will be many guests for the third test, so the fights could take too long and we have limited time, Hayate said. So. Anyway, anyone who is not feeling well, or those who don't want to continue after these explanations, please step forward. As the preliminaries will begin immediately, Hayate said. Oi! Why do you want to know if we're okay? Naruto thought that Hayate's words made her perspire. Kiba cried out, "What right now? I quit," Kabuto declared, raising his hand. Kabuto? How come he would give up now? When Kabuto raised his hand, Naruto thought. "You can go now. Yakushi Kabuto from Konoha?" Hayate said, writing something on a clipboard. Hayate said, "Would anyone else like cough to retire? I also forgot to say that from now on the test is individual, so you may quit based on your own judgment," just after Kabuto had left the room. After a few minutes of waiting, Hayate said, So are there no more people retiring?" Now so let's start. Cough. The preliminaries. The preliminaries will consist of one-on-one fights and you will fight as if in a cough. Real-life confrontation. As there are exactly 20 of you left, there will be 10 matches, which means only cough. Half of you can proceed to the main event, Hayate clarified when he realized that nobody was going to give up. There are no rules. The cough fight continues until one of you dies, gets knocked out or gives up. If you don't want to die then cough. Give up right away. Because we don't want pointless bloodshed. Cough. I will step in and stop things, Hayate continued. When Hayate was done, a panel beside the statue opened, revealing a screen. Hayate pointed to the screen and said, "This will determine who fights who. So let's see who fights first." After scrolling through the participants' names, the screen abruptly stopped on 2 of them. The 2 names caused a few people to gasp. It said, Choji versus Shikamaru, on the screen. Can Shikamaru and Choji cough remain behind while the rest move up to cough the balcony, said Hayate. Everyone went up to the balcony, with the exception of Hayate, Choji, and Shikamaru. The Hokage, Ibiki, Anko, and Iruka stayed in front of the statue while the Jonin instructors joined their teams on the balcony. Naruto glanced at Shikamaru and Choji and asked, "Asuma Sensei, will they be alright?" Asuma responded, "That's if they even fight. Shikamaru is too lazy to bother and Choji is too gentle and refuses to hurt his friends," adding that she was unsure of how this would end. "You guys ready?" Hayate inquired, glancing between Choji and Shikamaru. Shikamaru yawned in response. "No, I'm not," he said. Hayate's eye twitched as he said, Okay." Shikamaru looked at his best friend and said, "This is too troublesome. Come on Choji, let's get this over with." Choji complained a little, not wanting to argue with his best friend. "Do I have to do this? Can't I just forfeit?" Asuma yelled, "Choji, if you forfeit now, I will forbid you from attending barracks." Asuma Sensei, Choji began to pronounce. Shikamaru asked loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Ey fatso, you going to fight or just sit there getting fatter?" Naruto said, "Oh boy," anticipating what would come next. With anger burning in his eyes, Choji yelled, "What did you call me?" "I called you fat, so what are you going to do about it?" Shikamaru asked, picking his nose nonchalantly. Choji said, "Please start the match," while maintaining eye contact with Shikamaru. Hayate leapt back a little and exclaimed, "Right. Begin." "I am big-boned, not fat," Choji exclaimed as she sealed her hand. Choji yelled, "Ninpo Baika no Jutsu," as his upper legs and chest grew significantly larger. "Zu," Choji uttered as his head, arms, and legs drew back into his body, forming a large, round ball. Choji yelled, "Nikuden Sensha," before his body began to rapidly spin and roll in Shikamaru's direction. Shikamaru sprang aside, allowing Choji to roll straight past him. To the surprise of a few, Choji abruptly turned and rolled back towards Shikamaru. Shikamaru was barely able to avoid the attack in time. Choji had to dodge the continuous attacks as Shikamaru led him, causing him to roll into a wall. Shikamaru eventually made it to his destination and stepped aside before Choji could get to him. Choji reacted swiftly, stopping his spinning and shrinking back to his normal self instead of slamming into the wall. Choji grunted and his legs buckled slightly from the impact as he swung his feet forward just in time and landed hard on the wall. After a speedy recovery, Choji somersaulted off the wall but was immobile upon landing. Shikamaru declared, "Kagemain complete," as he moved to the middle of the floor, making Choji imitate him. Shikamaru said, "You should give up Choji," as he stood behind Choji. Choji gave up, a little disappointed in himself. "Yeah, I give up. Not that I had chance against you Shikamaru," he said. Choji forfeits. Shikamaru wins and advances through to the main event, said Hayate. Shikamaru and Choji approached the balcony and joined their friends and allies. No hard feelings, Choji. You know I didn't mean what I said, Shikamaru said, regretting his slight. Yeah, no hard feelings, declared Choji, grinning. Naruto ran over to them and grinned, saying, Hey Choji, Shikamaru, both of you did great there. Choji answered, Thanks, but I didn't stand a chance against. Shikamaru shook his head and said, No Choji, I didn't stand a chance, it's just that your kindness and heart held you back. Choji questioned, Do you really think that? He is right. You are much stronger than you give yourself credit for, replied Naruto. Thanks you guys, a smiling Choji said. To find out who would come next, everyone looked at the board. Before stopping and displaying the following 2 names, the screen swiftly scrolled through the names. Kin vs Sasuke. Kin and Sasuke, please make your way down, Hinata said after glancing at the screen. Kin and Sasuke leapt down from the balcony. Sasuke's and Kin's faces were smirking. You ready? Hinata asked, glancing at Sasuke, who simply nodded. Glancing at Kin, Hinata questioned, Are you ready? Kin responded, Oh, I'm always ready for pretty boy over here, and presented Sasuke with a seductive pose and glance. Kin became a little irate when Sasuke showed no response to her attempts at seduction. Kin's voice was sweet as she asked, What am I too pretty for you? Sasuke looked up at Naruto and made her blush. I couldn't care less, and besides there is only one person that's beautiful in my eyes, he said. Kin followed Sasuke's gaze and saw Naruto. Her? Please, she isn't half the person I am, Kin said. Kin's comments didn't change Sasuke's mind. Like I said, I couldn't care less what you think, but you shouldn't judge a person by their looks, he said. Kin said, rolling her eyes, A girl dressing up for you tells me more than enough, after observing Naruto's tails and ears. Sasuke replied, This just proves my point. You are quick to judge and label someone, but I don't need to defend her, she is more than capable of doing that on her own, before turning to face Naruto and giving her a wink and a smile that made her blush even more. Naruto mentally thanked Sasuke-kun, saying, Thank you. Hinata declared, The match begins now, to begin the fight. Kin threw a set of senbons at Sasuke and immediately leapt back. He swerved around the senbons with ease, then charged at Kin before abruptly reappearing directly in front of her. When she saw Sasuke standing directly in front of her, her eyes widened. With a fairly forceful blow to Kin's stomach with his left hand, Sasuke sent her flying into the wall behind her. When Kin struck the fall and collapsed to the ground, a fissure appeared in the wall. Sasuke kept his left hand out in front of him in the punching position. How swiftly the fight ended and how weak the girl was, or was he simply that much stronger than he realized, surprised Sasuke. Wow, Sasuke is a lot faster and stronger than he was before, Ino exclaimed, her eyes opening wide. Yay, he is a completely different person, Kiba said in astonishment. This just got a whole lot more troublesome, Shikamaru remarked, expressing surprise at Sasuke's development. Seems like we got the easy fight, Choji. Hinata said, Sasuke is the winner by knockout, after making sure Kin was okay. Still in shock and unsure of his true strength, Sasuke began to approach the balcony. Yash Kakashi, you students' flames of youth shine bright, a voice behind the group said. When everyone turned around, they saw a man who was at least as tall as Kakashi. The man had thick eyebrows and black hair and eyes. He had on a green Konoha Chunin utility jacket and a full green body spandex suit. He was wearing blue shinobi sandals and an orange strip of cloth that extended up to the bottom of his knees. This odd man flashed his bright white teeth in a broad smile. It seemed to Naruto and Sakura that Lee had suddenly become taller. However, when they noticed Lee, Neji, and Tenten behind the taller Lee clone, that thought was altered. Kakashi glanced at the odd green man as he turned his head to the side. With a lifeless tone, Kakashi questioned, Did you say something? The man said, Ga, Kakashi, you and your hip attitude, as tears welled up in his eyes. Sakura, quite alarmed by this oddball, asked, Kakashi. Sensei, who is this weird person? The person now known as Guy grinned broadly and held up his thumb, exclaiming, Why, my youthful comrade, I am Kakashi's eternal rival and Konoha no Kedakaki all Emoju, made a Guy. Naruto glanced between Guy and Lee and remarked, So you are the two people I see every morning running around the village. As Lee approached Naruto, he said, Yes, that is us you see, Naruto-san. We have also seen you training every morning, you should join us. Naruto exclaimed with joy, I would love to join you guys. Normally, Tenten would have cautioned against this, but she refrained because she was a little afraid of Naruto. Yash, your flames of youth burn bright, Guy reaffirmed, raising his thumb. Sasuke-kun! Exclaimed Naruto as he embraced and kissed Sasuke upon arriving. When Sasuke was abruptly brought back to reality, someone gave him a hug and a kiss. Before accepting the kiss and giving the hug back, he realized right away who it was. When Sakura, Hinata, and Tenten witnessed Naruto kissing Sasuke, they blushed, and Ino became envious once more. Well done Sasuke-kun, you really showed her, Naruto grinned. Still not quite believing it, Sasuke said, yeah, I did. I'm quite surprised. I thought she would put up more of a fight. Well, that's Sasuke-kun for you, no doubt the strongest genin here, admitted Ino, who is still a Sasuke fangirl. Sorry to burst your bubble here Ino, but I am not the strongest. Naruto is much stronger than I am. I don't come anywhere near Naruto's level, Sasuke said with a sigh. Ino remarked, Sasuke-kun, you are just being modest, not thinking Naruto was that powerful. Sasuke shook his head once more and said, no, I'm not. I haven't even come close to defeating Naruto in a spar. While Neji was interested in what Sasuke had said, Lee's hopes were immediately raised by this. After hearing that, Ino remained silent and kept looking at Naruto. Tenten was even more terrified of Naruto after she pondered how strong she really was. Naruto noticed the fear in Tenten's eyes, but before she could respond or even consider it, the screen began scrolling through a list of names, drawing everyone's attention. At the next set of names, the screen froze. Neji vs Masumi. Neji and Masumi, please make your way down, Hayate said, glancing up at the balcony. Neji and Masumi both headed down to the arena. Masumi didn't appear very impressive, and his eyes were visible through a mask that covered his face. When Masumi reached the bottom of the stairs, he slightly raised his glasses. Neji and Masumi stood a few meters apart, facing one another and giving each other a stern look. Both nodded in response to Hayate's question, you ready? Hayate said, begin, after observing the two nod. As soon as Hayate said, begin, Masumi charged at Neji. When Masumi got close to Neji, he threw a left punch in the face, which Neji deflected easily. Before being hit in the chest, Masumi delivered a few more blows, all of which were easily deflected. Sensing that the blow had caused more harm than necessary, Masumi leapt back. Neji stated without emotion, that was just a weak attack. If that is all you can do, I'd suggest you give up. In response, Masumi simply went back inside and punched Neji once more, but it was easily deflected. Neji was somewhat taken aback by what transpired next. Masumi repeatedly slithered and stretched around him and his limbs. Masumi's limbs and body were stretched to an unnatural length, which prevented Neji from moving. Masumi squeezed a little harder and said, my body has been changed so I can fit into any space. I can keep squeezing until your bones break. I suggest you give up. It is you that should give up, Neji said calmly. You're in no position to give demands. You could really die here, warned Masumi. Neji said, I warned you, and then he closed his eyes. Neji focused, then released chakra throughout his body. Masumi was struck by the chakra burst, and because of the intense contact and volume of chakra, he died instantly. He sagged to the ground as Masumi's hold relaxed. When Hayate showed up beside Masumi, she felt for a pulse but couldn't find one. Hayate stood and said, Masumi has been killed. Neji advances to the main event, before shaking his head as Neji made his way to the balcony. Hayate muttered, surely he must know what a Hyuga can do, understanding that using taijutsu against a Hyuga is tantamount to wishing for death. Sakura asked, unsure of what had happened, Kakashi, Sensei, what happened? Normally he would release a small amount of chakra from his palms when he strikes a target, but this time he instead released chakra throughout body, which is what killed him, Kakashi said. Sakura questioned, why would that kill someone? That is because Neji forced his own chakra into Masumi's chakra network, which disrupts and damages his network system. As the chakra coils are intertwined with one's organs, an attack on one's chakra network is almost always lethal, Kakashi clarified. Sakura was intrigued by this and inquired, but how can he attack his chakra network when you can't see where it is? The Byakugan allows a Hyuga to see the chakra pathways and tenketsu located throughout the body. The Hyuga use this ability to attack the chakra network and tenketsu directly and accurately. Their fighting style is known as the Juken style, Kakashi stated. The inside of one's body is the most vulnerable as you can't train the inside of your body, Naruto stated, demonstrating his full awareness of the potential for Hyuga death. Kakashi grinned and said, that's right, Naru-chan. This is why the Hyugas are famous for their taijutsu and why a taijutsu battle against them is suicide. When it began its routine to choose the next two contestants, everyone's focus was returned to the screen. Naruto became more excited for the next battle after the screen stopped working for a short while. Hayate yelled, "Gaara vs Yoroi. Please make your way down to the arena," loudly. Gaara quickly vanished into the sand and then reformed close to Hayate. Naruto muttered something about how Gaara flaunted herself and that she was capable of doing the same. Yoroi, not wanting to waste time, also leapt down. Yoroi smirked and said, "A bit of a show-off, are we? No matter, I will put you in your place." Gaara remained silent and continued to stare at Yoroi without showing any emotion. Yoroi clenched his jaw in frustration at the silence. Before beginning the match, Hayate glanced at Yoroi and Gaara. Hayate yelled, "Begin," and leapt back, giving them room to battle. Everyone could keep up with Yoroi's medium pace as she ran towards Gaara. Yoroi was surprised when Gaara threw a punch at him, but it was deflected by a little wall of sand. Yoroi leapt back a little before re-entering and kicking and punching Gaara. Sand seemed to work itself, blocking every kick and punch. Yoroi attempted to strike Gaara from behind, but the sand stopped him before Gaara could turn to face him. Sakura questioned, "What the? How can he block attacks like that?" after witnessing Gaara deflect attacks without looking. Kankuro said, "His sand has a will of its own. Whether he wills it to or not, his sand blocks all attacks," as he and Temari approached them. Sakura said, her eyes widening, "That means," Kankuro nodded his head in agreement and stated, "Yes, all attacks are ineffective against him." Naruto remarked, "Yes, that may be true, but I already see two weaknesses here," as he observed Yoroi's inability to launch an attack. "Two?" Temari asked, her eyes wide. Bewildered, Kankuro uttered, "I don't understand, I haven't seen anyone that can lay a hand on Gaara." When Naruto said, "Orochimaru managed to," Team 7, Kankuro, and Temari's eyes widened in remembrance of Orochimaru's ability to inject Gaara with a drug of some kind. "I don't see what weaknesses a jutsu like this can have," Ino remarked, unable to see what Naruto was observing. Naruto shook her head and said, "I won't tell what they are, it will be unfair for Gaara and you should discover them for yourself." "Please, are you okay?" Drawing out each syllable of Naruto's name, Ino asked. "I apologize, Ino. Since this is a tournament where you can test your current skills, it would be unfair to Gaara if I told you his weakness because it could hurt your chances of becoming a Chunin." Naruto turned to Ino and remarked, "You have a lot to work on if you can't comprehend this." Kakashi smiled proudly at Naruto, saying, "She already understands the whole point of this exam. You might just become a Chunin, Naruto." Back with Yoroi and Gaara. Gaara was tired of the fight and decided to just end it after Yoroi had been trying to get past his defense for the last 5 minutes. He raised his hand and sent his sand flying in the direction of the charging Yoroi. Because Yoroi was unable to act quickly enough, he ended up entirely covered in sand, with only his face showing. "Stop. You can't get out of this," Gaara stated impassively. Gaara would usually kill them without a word, so Kankuro and Temari were a little taken aback. Yoroi struggled and struggled to get free. "Your efforts are in vain. There's no getting out of this. I advise you to give up," Gaara said, tightening his grip on Yoroi with his sand. Gaara simply shook his head before gradually increasing the pressure, causing Yoroi to scream in agony as he gritted his teeth in agony but refused to give up and kept struggling to free himself. Gaara remarked, "Give up if you don't want to die," as Hayate contemplated stopping the match himself and Yoroi continued to struggle. Yoroi's screams grew louder as Gaara applied more pressure once more. Yoroi can't get away. Gaara advances to the main event after winning. Hayate declared, "I see no point in continuing the match," and ended it. Gaara used a sand shunshin and reappeared beside Kankuro and Temari after releasing his sand and dropping Yoroi to the ground, whereupon he fainted before hitting the ground. Naruto grinned and said, "Well done, Gaara," as her tail slowly waved back and forth. Everyone turned to watch the screen spin through the names for a few seconds before stopping and landing on the next two names, and Gaara simply nodded back with a slight smile of his own. "Sakura vs Zaku." Hayate said, Please. Cough. Your way down to the arena." When Sakura realized that she was anxious about her fight because she didn't know what to anticipate and didn't want to let her teammates down, Naruto put a hand on her shoulder and gave it a comforting squeeze. Sakura turned to see Naruto grinning. "Don't worry, Sakura. Give it your all, and I'm sure you'll be alright." Naruto tried to reassure Sakura and give her some advice by saying, "Just relax and forget what others think." In an attempt to reassure Sakura, Sasuke grinned and said, "Sakura, you will be fine. You are much stronger than you realize." Sakura grinned and said, "Thank you, you guys," while Kakashi grinned and expressed his pride in his team. Zaku was waiting impatiently for her when Sakura came down, so she stopped a few meters in front of him and waited for the game to begin. "Does Miss Cry Baby need her team to console her?" Zaku sneered and then burst out laughing. Sakura simply scowled before assuming a simple stance and staring at Zaku, who chuckled before assuming a stance of his own. Naruto was not pleased with Zaku's mockery of Sakura, but he refrained for Sakura's benefit. "Start." Observing the two in their combat positions, Hayate remarked. "Zankuha." Zaku immediately yelled as he raised both of his hands and blasted Sakura with a gust of wind. Sakura gritted her teeth and grunted before lowering her arms slightly to aim at Zaku after the attack pushed her back a few inches and cut her forearm multiple times while she was holding her hands in front of her face to block it. "So you made it through that? Let's see if you make it through this." Zaku scoffed before hurling Sakura another blast of wind. Sakura couldn't stand his taunting any longer, and she easily avoided the attack, shocking Zaku, who became enraged and sent Sakura multiple gusts of wind and more. Sakura easily avoided the attacks while avoiding them. Sakura did not try to attack, but instead waited for a while to see how long Zaku could continue, and she was astonished at how easily she was able to avoid the attacks. After a few minutes, Zaku did begin to grow weary of attacking and not hitting Sakura. When Sakura saw that Zaku's attack rate had drastically decreased and his movements were becoming sluggish, she launched an offensive and swiftly drew closer to him, shocking Zaku by practically appearing in front of him at once. When Sakura finally got to Zaku, she threw her fist as hard as she could, sending him flying to the wall behind him with a sickening crunch and crack that sent everyone in the arena to their knees. When Zaku struck the wall, he coughed up blood and his eyes widened, creating a hole from the impact. He stayed motionless inside the wall, his mouth and eyes wide open, and Sakura looked at him with wide, trembling eyes. Zaku was motionless against the wall, with no light behind his open eyes, so it was obvious that Hayate didn't need to check for a pulse. He shook his head at him and then signaled for the medics. Hayate looked at the dead Zaku and said, "There is no way this kid survived that attack. His chest is completely crushed and no doubt died shortly after hitting the wall. Zaku has passed away." Just loud enough for everyone to hear, Hayate declared. Sakura advances to the main event. Sakura dropped to her knees, then leaned over and drained her stomach, staying on her hands and knees with her eyes wide open, mentally reliving the events that had just transpired. Naruto and Kakashi immediately reappeared next to Sakura. In an attempt to calm Sakura, Naruto pulled her into a tight embrace and wrapped her tails around her. She could hear Sakura whimpering softly and felt Sakura trembling violently in her arms. Kakashi also tried to calm Sakura by placing a hand on her. As she continued to embrace Sakura and attempted to soothe her, Naruto and Kakashi used a shunshin and resurfaced on the balcony. "Be quiet. It's okay, Sakura." Sakura was sobbing quietly into Naruto's shoulder when Naruto said, "Shush, I'm here, I'm here." Sasuke and the other 9 rookies ran to Sakura, but Kakashi only allowed Sasuke to approach and held the others back, including Ino. Naruto sat down with Sakura on her lap, facing her, and her tails still wrapped around her for protection. Poor HMMPH. This is no place for a weakling like her. Like the weakling she is, fate would have her suffer and cry, Neji sneered. As he released her and Kurama's killing intent, Naruto's eyes turned blood red and gave Neji a hard, cold stare. Neji shivered and began to perspire from the sheer volume of killing intent Naruto directed at him. "Whether you're a fellow comrade or not, you'll control your tongue. Nothing in this world or any other world will spare you from my wrath if you even consider touching her or any of my friends," Naruto snarled in a low, icy, demonic voice that caused Neji to perspire hysterically. Kakashi said, "Neji-san, I suggest you leave now," in a cheerful tone and with an eye smile that Neji took for friendliness. Since he had only seen Kakashi like this a few times and knew he was anything but happy, Guy moved Neji to the opposite side of the balcony and stood in front of him. The other 9 rookies mentally noted that they should never again get on Naruto's bad side. Dosu versus Temari. Hayate called out, please make cough your way to the arena, drawing everyone's attention. With a smirk on her face, Temari was eager and more than prepared for this fight. Ever since Naruto defeated Shukaku and she learned about the weights Team 7 used, she increased her training and began using more weights. Dosu and Temari both leapt to the ground and stared at each other. "Are you both prepared?" According to Temari, Hayate's question was rather meaningless. As Temari raised her big fan and assumed a stance, they both nodded. "Start." Hayate proclaimed as the match began. Before opening her fan to reveal a single star, Temari leapt backward, gaining distance from Dosu. She then began waving her fan, sending airborne bullets directly at Dosu, who dodged them and drew closer to Temari. Temari closed her fan and swung it to strike Dosu in the head as he approached, and Dosu ducked beneath it, allowing Temari to spin around with the fan pulling it back around. When the fan connected, Dosu immediately regretted his choice to block the attack with his left arm raised and the strange tool in his hand. The impact sent Dosu skidding back several meters and he flinched in pain as he lost control of his arm, which flopped down as blood began to pour out of it. Knowing that his arm was broken, possibly shattered, Dosu gritted his teeth in agony and knelt on one knee, holding his severely injured arm. "I'm shocked that you're still alive after stopping one of my fan's attacks." Temari grinned and remarked, "I suppose that thing on your arm protected you a little." "Damn you, Ga," Dosu said as he recklessly charged back in. When Dosu reached her, Temari leapt to her feet and spun, extending her left foot. When Temari's foot struck Dosu's face, it sent him flying, forcing Hayate to step aside. Dosu landed on the ground before skidding and stopping in front of Anko. When Hayate passed Dosu, she noticed that he was conscious but not conscious. "Dosu has lost the battle," Hayate remarked. Temari advances to the main event, to which Temari smiled and proceeded to the balcony. Knowing what it's like to experience one's first kill, Temari walked past Sakura and Naruto, grinning slightly as Sakura trembled occasionally despite Naruto's efforts to calm her. Naruto sighed as the screen rolled through the following list of names for a few seconds before stopping. Tenten vs Naruto. Hayate said, "Please head down to the arena, loud enough for everyone to hear." Sakura released Naruto and smiled warmly at her before Naruto jumped down from the balcony and walked slowly to the edge to watch the match. Naruto grudgingly unwrapped her tails that were wrapped around Sakura and stood up still holding Sakura. Tenten leapt to the ground, walked slowly to the center, and stopped a few meters in front of Naruto, who could see the fear in Tenten's eyes and knew it was aimed at her. Naruto's ears and tails fell in a slightly dejected manner. "I am the one you fear." Only Tenten and Hayate could hear Naruto say, "I can see it in your eyes." "Did I say that to Neji?" Inquiring as to why Tenten was afraid of her, Naruto asked. "NN number, but that didn't help," Tenten said, her voice a little scared. "No? So what's causing your fear?" Naruto inquired. "I wasn't at first, but that stunt you pulled before the exam, you really did scare a lot of us there," replied Tenten. "I apologize for that. I see. I'm just really guarded about the few friends I have," Naruto remarked, grinning slightly. Tenten said, "Well, it's no wonder you have so few friends if you go around doing that," as he relaxed a little at Naruto's slight, kind smile. Naruto lamented, Maybe now, but it's mostly, always because of another reason." Tenten was sorry for what she had just said, and he could see the sorrow in her eyes. Naruto bowed to Tenten and said, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry for scaring you like that." Tenten was genuinely taken aback by this. She had no idea what to anticipate from Naruto, but this was not one of them. Tenten smiled and said, "We'll call it even if you fight me with everything you have." Standing up straight, Naruto said, I don't think that's a good idea, but I will respect your wish." She would fight fiercely, but not at full strength because she might injure or even kill Tenten. "Start." After observing the two assume their respective positions, Hayate remarked. Tenten started right away by taking out a scroll and opening it, then hurling a barrage of weapons that were sealed inside the scroll at Naruto, who was able to effortlessly dodge them and weave in and out with ease, showcasing her flexibility and agility. Tenten removed 2 more scrolls after hers was empty, then proceeded to empty the contents of the scroll once more and threw them at Naruto, who was somewhat taken aback by the quantity and accuracy of the objects she was receiving. When Tenten realized that throwing weapons at Naruto was futile, he changed tactics by unsealing a bow and charging towards her. Naruto continued to effortlessly avoid the weapons being thrown at her, occasionally knocking a few away from her with a tail. Naruto truly displayed her agility and flexibility by weaving, bending, and jumping to avoid Tenten's vicious attacks, and she responded by attacking her with a fluid combination of jabs, swipes, swings, and strikes. Tenten became irritated with Naruto's obvious holding back and interjected, saying, "You are holding back, fight me, seriously," in between attacks. Tenten felt her feet suddenly swept from beneath her as Naruto abruptly let the bow hit her before vanishing in a puff of smoke, shocking her enough to stop her in her tracks. Naruto caught Tenten before she could hit the ground and gently laid her on the ground with her claws pressing against her neck. Tenten looked down as she fell backwards and saw Naruto spinning low on the ground with a foot out. "I win," Naruto grinned as he turned to face a startled Tenten. While the rest of the elite Jonin saw Naruto suddenly puff up in smoke and then appear behind Tenten crouching low on the ground mid-spin, only a small number of them actually witnessed what happened. "We've defeated Tenten." Hayate announced Naruto as the winner, saying, "Naruto advances through to the main event." Naruto assisted Tenten in standing up again. "How? What took place?" Tenten asked, perplexed by what had transpired. Naruto pointed to the roof and Tenten looked up. "Before the match started I created a buncheon which planted itself on the roof," he said. "I changed to the buncheon on the roof when you charged in." Naruto grinned and said, "When you hit the buncheon, it dispelled, and I fell from the roof, landing behind you, and well, you know the rest." "Nobody ever raises their head. I don't know why, but nobody looks up," Naruto remarked as she and Tenten ascended the balcony's stairs. Before more could be said or done, the screen began scrolling through the next set of names, leaving the final few in suspense. Sakura and Sasuke were the only two of the Rookie 9 who were not surprised because they still didn't know what had truly happened. Ino vs. Kiba. After reading the screen, Hayate said, "Please head down to the arena." Kiba jumped down and put Orochimaru down from sitting on top of Kiba's head, while Ino made her way down the stairs without anticipating this fight. Kiba and Ino exchanged glances, with Kiba wearing a broad smile and Ino wearing a nervous one. Ino became even more anxious when he stopped a few meters in front of Kiba, who was still smiling. "Are you ready?" Gazing at Ino, Hayate posed the question. Ino sighed as he assumed a stance and said, "Let's just get this over with." "Are you prepared?" Glancing at Kiba, Hayate posed the question. Kiba remarked, "I'm always ready," as he assumed a stance. "Start." As the match began, Hayate said. Kiba made a Hitsuji hand seal and said, "Sorry Ino, but I am going to end this quickly with one punch." "Ninpo. Jutsu no Shikyaku." Kiba cried out before lowering his hands to the floor. Kiba's nails grew into long claws, and his expression became more animalistic. Ino swallowed, then steadied herself and braced herself for anything, but nothing could prepare her for what came next, as Kiba suddenly materialized in front of her with his fist cocked back. Kiba's speed startled Sasuke, Sakura, Naruto, and the other 9 rookies. He threw his fist at Ino's face, which she barely avoided by tilting her head to the side. After shooting past Ino, Kiba swiftly recovered and bounced back towards her, leaving Ino with nothing to do but watch as Kiba bounced back, her back to him. Kiba grabbed Ino's left arm with his left hand and pulled it while pressing it behind her back. After Ino screamed briefly due to the harsh treatment, Kiba put his right hand by his throat and snarled, choking Ino a little. "Stop." Kiba spoke into Ino's ear, "I don't want to hurt you." "Oh, you're hurting me already," Ino said, raising her voice a little. Kiba said, "Sorry Ino, but please give up," as she pressed her arm more firmly against her back, causing her to let out another brief cry of agony. I give up, you win," Ino said, unable to escape this situation. Ino gives up. Hayate declared the winner. Kiba advances to the main event. Before Orochimaru ran toward him, barking and wagging his tail, Kiba released Ino from his grasp, and Ino began to stretch and rub her arm in an attempt to relieve the pain. Kiba then pulled out a small round container and approached Ino. Kiba held out the tiny cream container and said, "This is a cream my sister made to relax and ease muscles." "Oh, thank you," Ino said as she accepted the cream. Kiba rubbed the back of his head and said, "I'm sorry if I hurt you too much." Ino winked at Kiba and said, "You know not all girls like it rough," before turning around and making her way to the balcony. As Ino walked back to the balcony, Kiba blushed quite a bit and watched her hips sway from side to side. He soon followed, keeping his eyes on her the entire time, and Orochimaru kept looking between Kiba and Ino before he had a few ideas. Hinata quietly remarked, "Well done, Kiba-kun," as Kiba returned to his team. "Many thanks, Hinata. I know you can succeed, so you should try your hardest too," Kiba said. "There are tough lines, Ino." Asuma said to Ino, "I hope you realize that you still have a lot to work on," and Ino nodded. "Yes, I am aware. Since the academy, even this forehead has significantly improved." With a sigh, Ino turned to face Sakura and said, "I hope she is okay." Even though Sakura had calmed down, she was still quite shaken from her first kill, so Naruto stayed close to her, keeping a few tails wrapped around her. Ino smiled subtly, pleased that Sakura had made Naruto a good friend. When the final few names appeared, everyone looked back at the screen. Yosh, I'll see it through to the end because I've come this far. I'd like to go last, Lee yelled. Let your youth shine brightly, Lee. The best will be saved for last. I'll run around Konoha on my hands until the sun sets if you don't fight last. With a broad smile on his face and his thumb held toward Lee, Guy yelled. Guy. Sensei, I'll show you my youthful springtime. I'll run around Konoha on my hands backwards until sunset if I don't fight last, Lee said, gazing at Guy with stars in his eyes. My Lee is that. Guy hugged Lee as he spoke, tears streaming from his eyes. Guy. Sensei, as he returned the hug, Lee said, his eyes welling with tears. Hey Lee. Guy. Sensei. As the rookie nine wondered how and why they knew such weirdos, Tenten and Neji deadpanned at the two, their eyes twitching constantly and a drop of sweat on the back of their heads. Kakashi, Asuma, and Kurenai simply shook their heads at Lee and Guy. The next fight's competitors were no longer displayed on the board. Yosha. Lee and Guy both yelled out. With a sigh, Hayate pondered the types of people that lived in Konoha. Kankuro versus Hinata. As Hayate said, please head down to the arena. When Hinata felt a hand on her shoulder, she began to slowly move in the direction of the stairs. When she turned to see who it was, Naruto was grinning warmly at her. Naruto went to reassure Hinata after noticing her anxiety. Before hugging Hinata, Naruto said softly, Hinata, have faith in yourself. You are much stronger than you realize. Like Choji, you hold back for fear of hurting someone. Just do your best and have confidence in yourself. Hinata returned the hug with a gentle smile, appreciating Naruto's comfort and encouragement. After letting go of the hug, she made her way to the arena, where Kankuro was waiting for her calmly. Gazing at Kankuro, Hayate questioned, Are you ready? Yeah, I'm ready, Kankuro said, letting go of the big white bandage, covered object behind his back. Gazing at Hinata, Hayate questioned, Are you ready? Hinata muttered, Yes, before assuming a stance and using her Byakugan. Hinata noticed something wrong with Kankuro right away. As though employing a henge jutsu, Kankuro was encased in a layer of chakra. When Hinata turned her attention to the object next to Kankuro, she was shocked to see that the person inside resembled Kankuro exactly. As soon as Hinata realized what Kankuro was up to, she devised a strategy to defeat him. Hayate said, To begin the match. I'm happy Naruto gave me the bravery and self-assurance she did. As Kankuro dropped the object next to him and charged at Hinata, Hinata thought, Thanks to her, I was able to come up with this attack. Kankuro began punching and kicking Hinata as soon as he got to him. The attacks were either sidestepped or deflected by Hinata. As Hinata waited for an opportunity to present itself, this went on for a few minutes. After a few minutes, one did appear, and Hinata used it to score a hit. Before striking Kankuro's chest, Hinata directed as much chakra as she could into her palm. The chakra that emerged from Hinata's palm was audible and visible to all. The sand covering Kankuro was entirely removed by Hinata's attack, and then Kankuro burst into numerous fragments. When sand burst out of Kankuro, revealing a wooden puppet, everyone was shocked and perplexed. The puppet then burst into numerous pieces that were scattered all over the floor. From the bandages covering him, another Kankuro emerged. Kankuro uttered the words, Damn it, you destroyed him. It's not easy putting them together, you know, angrily. The puppet's head suddenly flew in Hinata's direction, a blade protruding from its gaping mouth. After avoiding the flying head, Hinata noticed a thin line of chakra emanating from the rear of the head. Hinata traced the line to its starting point in Kankuro's hand. Hinata sidestepped the head that was flying in her direction. The head, meanwhile, turned and flew back in Hinata's direction. When Hinata could take no more of this flying head, she stepped aside, covered her hand with chakra, and severed the chakra line that connected it to the head. After continuing on its course, the flying head lodged itself in the wall behind Hinata. As Hinata charged, Kankuro had to leap back to escape the assault. You are in my divination, Hinata declared as she assumed a pose that Neji was all too familiar with, which infuriated him. Kankuro was unable to respond when Hinata yelled, Jukano. Hake Sanju Nisho, before swiftly charging in. Hake Nisho, Yansho, Hasha, Ju Rokusho. Before the final attack sent Kankuro flying back a few meters along the ground, Hinata uttered the words, Sanju Nisho, with each blow. When Hayate approached Kankuro, he discovered that he was unconscious. Hayate announced the winner. Hinata wins and advances to the main event, as medical personnel arrived to pick Kankuro up. As Hinata walked up to the balcony, she cheered happily inside. Despite her practice, she was still unable to perform the entire Rokujusho version. She ran up to Naruto as soon as she saw her, threw herself at her, and gave her a tight hug. Hinata's aggressiveness took Naruto by surprise. "Well done, Hinata. I knew you could do it," Naruto exclaimed with joy as he gave Hinata a hug. Hinata said, "Thank you, Naruto," as she let go of the hug. "No, that was all you. I only gave you the push that you needed," Naruto shook her head. Kiba remarked, "Well done, Hinata. You showed him," following Naruto and Hinata's arrival at the location where the other 9 rookies were. When Kiba said, "Thank you, Kiba-kun," Hinata responded. In an attempt to begin the final match, Hayate said, Could the final 2 competitors please make their way down?" To begin their match, Shino and Lee both leapt to the ground. Lee's excitement for his match was evident to all. Lee said, "Yosha. Shino-san, let's do our best," as he assumed a stance. Shino raised his arms and said, "I will do my best." Why? Because a lot is riding on this match, as insects began to swarm around him. Ino exclaimed, "Ew. I still can't get used to that," as she watched Shino exude bugs. "Yeah, I'm still not used to it and I'm on his team," Kiba said, a little shivering. "Begin," exclaimed Hayate, observing that the pair was prepared. Lee surprised Shino by charging swiftly. Shino had to block the next blow after narrowly avoiding the one Lee threw at him. The blow caused Shino's arm to tremble a little, and he leapt back in an attempt to separate from Lee. Shino discovered that leaping back was ineffective because Lee had already caught up to him and was launching his vicious attack again. Lee would land a hit or two after every few blocks, which began to wear on Shino. Lee struck Shino with a forceful kick when he entered. After being kicked, Shino abruptly broke and dispersed into thousands of bugs. When Lee turned around, he saw Shino standing a few meters away, panting. When Shino gestured to the ground, Lee looked down and noticed numerous insects beginning to climb his legs. Shino explained, hoping that Lee would give up because he didn't want to kill or end his ninja career. "You should give up. My Kakaichu feed off chakra and at this rate they will leave you dry if you don't give up," Shino said. "I am sorry, Guy Sensei, but it seems I have to break your rule," Lee yelled. Guy yelled back, "That's fine, Lee. I will make an exception for the exam. Go for it, Lee," and extended his thumb. Focusing, Lee held his arms in a cross above his head. Lee exclaimed, "Kaimon Kai," as his forehead's veins began to enlarge and become visible. Kakashi glared at Guy and exclaimed, "Guy, what the hell were you thinking? That is a kinjutsu. I don't want to hear that from you, Kakashi." "Lee has no talent in nin or genjutsu," Guy responded. Kakashi asked, exposing his Sharingan, "How many?" With pride, Guy remarked, "He can open 5 of them. It's impressive for his age." "Very impressive. There are very few people who can actually do this," Kakashi remarked in his analysis of Lee. When Sasuke noticed Kakashi's Sharingan, he activated his own to find out what was going on. "Kyumon Kai. Simon Kai." Lee yelled, "Shoman Kai," as the wind began to pick up around him and his veins grew larger. Naruto, who had never witnessed this before, questioned, "Oi Kakashi, what is Lee doing? I can feel great power coming off of him." In each of our bodies there are 8 gates: initial, heal, life, harm, limit, view, wonder and death, in which our chakra flows though. The initial gate releases the brain's restraints, increasing your power tenfold but damaging the body at the same time, Kakashi said. The heal gate forcibly increases your stamina, and from the life gate on you enter what Guy calls the extreme lotus. However, this technique is a true double-edged sword. Opening all 8 result in power far beyond the cages, but you will die in exchange for this power, Kakashi concluded. Naruto was fascinated by this technique as he observed Lee. Lee said, "Toman Kai," as he opened the 5th gate. Lee's pupils dwindled until his eyes were entirely white, and his body was covered in what appeared to be green chakra. In the meantime, every bug that was creeping up his body was burned away by the green chakra. Naruto inquired, "Is that chakra?" after noticing Lee's green aura. "No, this is a misconception amongst everyone that sees this. The green aura is in fact sweat being released from Lee's body. His sweat gives a green aura because his sweat is being instantly evaporated," Guy clarified in response to Naruto's query. Back with Lee and Shino. Shino lost quite a few of his bugs, so he did not like this. Shino promptly sent Lee a ball of his bugs to observe the outcome. After vanishing from view, Lee reappeared behind Shino. Shino was knocked unconscious by Lee's light blow to the back of his neck, which was still quite forceful. When Lee relaxed, his pupils returned and the green aura around him vanished. Exhausted from opening his inner gates, he knelt on one knee and breathed heavily. Saying, "Shino loses." Lee advances to the main event. Hayate announced the conclusion of the bout. Hayate announced the conclusion of the preliminary proceedings before issuing an order. The preliminaries have come to an end. Can all those going to the main event please make your way down for further instructions, she said. In a straight line in front of Hayate, Shikamaru, Sasuke, Neji, Gaara, Sakura, Naruto, Temari, Kiba, and Hinata joined Lee after walking down. Hayate grinned as she glanced from left to right and saw the genin that would be attending the main event. Hayate said, "Well done to all of you here. You all pass and now have the right to compete in the main event," to which they all responded with a smile, a smirk, or a disinterested expression. Hayate said, "Well then Hokage. Sama if you please," and moved aside. "Thank you. Now I will explain the third test for the Chunin selection exam," the Hokage replied. At last, Naruto thought smirkingly, "As I said before, in the main event, your matches will be seen by everybody. Each of you will fight to represent your countries. I'd like you to show off all of your powers with no reserves. Which is why the main event will be held a month on now," said the Hokage with seriousness. "Why don't we do it now?" Naruto said quietly. "This break, you can say, will be for preparations," the Hokage clarified. The normally quiet Hinata asked loudly enough for most people to hear, "What do you mean?" This means that in addition to also notifying the other countries and various people, that this time will be used for the gathering of the event and for you to get to know yourselves and your enemies, the Hokage explained to a few individuals. Kankuro became irritated with the Hokage's speech and thought, "This old man always makes things complicated when he speaks." Kankuro said, "Like we said, what do you mean? This is the time period you will calculate your chances of winning by analyzing the data you have gathered within the preliminaries. The battles you had up until now had you fight as if you were in actual combat with the assumption of fighting an unknown opponent," said the Hokage. "That's definitely true." With a bored expression on his face, Shikamaru thought, who would have guessed that Gaara uses sand as a weapon? The Hokage went on to say, "But the main event won't be like this. Some people competed and lost to a formidable opponent, while others demonstrated their full abilities. To make everything fair, you should use a month to advance and better yourself." The Hokage concluded his explanation by saying, "Of course it'll be fine to rest your body as well. I'm confident that Sasuke and Sakura will have a great time in a month, and I will too," Naruto thought as he looked at them. The Hokage grinned and said, "I would like to dismiss you, but there is one thing left to do. Please take only one piece of paper from the pieces in this box. Would you please, Anko?" As Anko moved forward with a brown box in her hand, the Hokage spoke. "I will come around, so please wait," Anko said as he approached Shikamaru. Anko then went to Neji, Lee, Temari, Gaara, Kiba, Hinata, Sakura, Sasuke, and finally Naruto. Shikamaru reached into the box, pulled out the page, opened it, and raised an eyebrow. Before opening it and seeing the number 8 on it, Naruto reached in and grabbed the final piece of paper. 8. What the devil? Naruto inquired in a bewildered manner. "Now please read the paper and say the number that is on it from left to right," Ibiki said to the person with the clipboard. 3, said Shikamaru in a disinterested manner. 1, Neji continued. 6, Lee's loud statement caused Neji to shake his head. 5, Temari said in a kind manner. 7, Gaara said without showing any emotion. 4, Kiba said with a shoulder shrug. 2, Hinata uttered, barely audible to Ibiki. Sakura said, 10, and Naruto could still see that she was uncomfortable. Sasuke said, 9, and then he glanced at Sakura, wondering what this might have been. 8, said Naruto, unsure of the purpose of this. The Hokage grinned and said, "Now I will reveal to you the final tournament." "What?" Kankuro and several others yelled. Shikamaru uttered the words, "That's what we drew the numbers for," with a hint of disgust. Sakura turned to face Sasuke, who was staring back at him for taking a rather large gulp, knowing what this meant. Naruto turned to face Gaara, who was also grinning. "Ibiki now." With a glance at Ibiki, the Hokage said, "Show them the match arrangements." Ibiki showed them the matches by turning the clipboard around. Hyuga Neji vs Hyuga Hinata is the first match. Match 2. Inuzuka Kiba vs Nara Shikamaru. Match 3. Rock Lee vs Temari. Gaara vs Uzumaki Naruto. Match 4. Match 5. Haruno Sakura vs Uchiha Sasuke. Match 6. Match 3 winner vs Match 4 winner. Match 7. First, Match Victor vs Second, Match Victor. Match 8. The winner of the 6th match faces the winner of the 5th. The winner of Match 7 will face the winner of Match 8. Following her analysis of the clipboard, Naruto thought, well, this is interesting. Hinata vs Neji, wonder how that will turn out. I'm versing Gaara right of the bat. I hope we don't destroy everything. But the kicker here is Sasuke-kun going up against Sakura. Sigh. This is going to be very interesting. Are there any questions before you're fired? The Hokage inquired. Yes. There can only be one winner because this is a tournament. Does that imply that we will all become Chunin? Shikamaru inquired. That's a reasonable assumption, but it's not true. The Kage, several national lords, and ninja leaders from other nations will be among the judges. The Hokage answered. We'll all be watching and assessing your skills throughout the competition. Even if you lose the first match, you can still become Chunin if you possess the abilities and skills required to do so. The Hokage went on. Those who win the match will have more opportunities to demonstrate their skills. Does that imply that we could all turn into Chunins? After hearing what was said, Temari said. When the Hokage said, yes, but it also means that there is the chance none of you become Chunin, some were shocked. So, Shikamaru-kun, do you understand now? The Hokage inquired. Yay, Shikamaru replied. Geez, this is such a hassle, Shikamaru groaned and shrugged his shoulders. The Hokage declared, very then you are all dismissed until a month from now, just before the majority of people began to scatter. For various reasons, Team 7 walked in silence, but when Kakashi appeared in front of them, their focus shifted. Well done, everyone. I'm so proud of you. I knew you could succeed, Kakashi said, grinning broadly as he expressed his pride in this team. Thanks, Kakashi. Naruto grinned. All three of them nodded when Kakashi said, meet me in an hour by our usual spot. Kakashi looked at Sakura and said, Sakura, could you please go for a walk with me? After giving a silent nod, Sakura left Naruto and Sasuke alone and followed Kakashi. I sincerely hope she's okay. Killing someone for the first time is difficult, Naruto remarked quietly. Sasuke turned to Naruto and said, she will be fine, but if you are still worried we can keep an eye on her for the next few days. Naruto said softly, thank you, and then she kissed Sasuke briefly. Sasuke said, so, do you want to do anything for this next hour? I'm sorry, Sasuke-kun, but I have to do something, Naruto apologized. Naruto giggled a little as Sasuke said, it's all right, go do what you need, though you owe me a date for this, with a cheeky smile. A date, It had better not interfere with my training, Naruto said, putting her arms around Sasuke's neck and kissing him tenderly. Sasuke put his arms around Naruto's waist and melted into the kiss, and when Naruto let out a sweet, gentle groan, Sasuke blushed and pressed the kiss deeper. They kissed for a few minutes, taking breaths every so often, until a cough broke the spell. When Naruto and Sasuke turned to the cough, they saw the Hokage standing there with Ibiki and Anko behind him, both of them grinning. Anko had a large smile on her face and a hungry expression in her eyes. Sasuke and Naruto blushed quite a bit because they felt so ashamed of this circumstance. Gigi! Naruto exclaimed, startled. Ibiki teased. Lovebirds went right to it, with a smile that made them blush even more. This is depressing. Anko looked at Naruto and sighed, I was hoping to get to you first. You don't mind telling me about Naru-chan, do you? Sasuke-kun? Anko licked her lips and said in a seductive manner. At the idea of sharing Naruto with Anko, Sasuke blushed more and developed a small nosebleed, which the Hokage expertly covered up while Ibiki wiped his nose clean. Naruto blushed in embarrassment, though she did see a few pictures of herself and Anko. Enough Anko, she is embarrassed enough, the Hokage said in an attempt to save Naruto. Do you want to share anything with me? The Hokage inquired. Naruto nodded her head in agreement. Yes, it's about what happened in the forest, she said. Anko said, so you did encounter that snake bastard, in a furious tone. Yes, but how? Naruto began to inquire. Anko responded, massaging her neck, I had a run-in with him after discovering 3 dead Kusanin outside the training grounds. Naruto gave them a brief account of what she had heard, saying, he said he was after Sasuke-kun, why I don't know. The Hokage commanded, tell us everything that happened. Sasuke told them his side of the story several times over the course of the next 40 minutes, followed by Naruto's, who only told them what Orochimaru said to her and that she believes she drove him away, without explaining how she fought him. Are you aware of his desires with Sasuke-kun, Gigi? After reviewing all the information several times, Naruto inquired. He wants to acquire all of the jutsu that he can find. He studies these jutsus in an effort to live and learn reason from them. He has been studying immortality as much as he can. The Hokage replied, he wants his Sharingan, not Sasuke in particular. Kid, I must talk to you right away. I will bother you about it because it's important, Kurama said abruptly, leaving Naruto to question why it was so crucial. He probably intended to curse Sasuke in the hopes that it would heighten your desire for power and hatred in your quest to kill Itachi. However, this was prevented in multiple ways by Naruto, the Hokage said, grinning as he gazed at the red-faced Naruto. This Naru-chan is spot on. Instead of killing him, I would like to apprehend him and allow him to live with the knowledge that he killed our parents and his clan. Sasuke cupped Naruto's cheek and gazed into her eyes, saying, if anything, death would be the easy way out for him. In order to be the one to defend you and stick by your side no matter what, I might want power rather than strength. Sasuke whispered, I want to get stronger so that nothing will ever separate us and so that when you go all out, I can go all out with you, and then he gave her a tender kiss that was brimming with passion. Naruto whispered, thank you Sasuke-kun, thank you, as she gave Sasuke a life-saving embrace. The Hokage put a hand on Naruto's shoulder and said, if there is anything more you need feel free to come to my office, before leaving with Ibiki and Anko, who were extremely proud of Naruto and Sasuke. Sasuke abruptly realized that they had been there for a while and said, we should get going, it's almost time to meet up with Kakashi, sensei. Naruto hurriedly pulled Sasuke out of the building and then stopped. Isn't it faster if you transformed into a fox? Sasuke remarked, we have a lot of ground to cover, keeping in mind that they still had roughly 11 miles to go. Naruto grinned and said, I have something a little better, which caused Sasuke to furrow his brow. What do you do better? Sasuke opened his mouth to say, then stopped and dropped his jaw. Rather than transforming into a fox, Naruto transformed into a large eagle, slightly taller than Sasuke, and then leaned down before gesturing for Sasuke to climb on. You mean? Sasuke asked, a little taken aback. Naruto chirped, "Ga," and nodded her head. Naruto flapped her huge wings as she slowly took off and flew into the sky, and Sasuke climbed up and braced himself for the ride of a lifetime. As Naruto climbed higher and higher, Sasuke experienced an adrenaline rush. After a few minutes, they were high above the clouds, and Sasuke could see a lot of Konoha and the surrounding lands. He looked down and saw the entire forest they had been in, and he grabbed on when Naruto started to pick up speed. Wow! Naruto, this is incredible! Sasuke sat up straight, feeling the wind rush past his face, and exclaimed, "We're flying, we're actually flying." "Gaaa," was Naruto's reply, as she turned her head sideways to face Sasuke, who was grinning broadly. Sasuke noticed that Naruto was staring back at him, but what really alarmed him was the sly expression in her eye. "Naruto, what are you doing?" With trepidation, Sasuke asked, and he could be certain that Naruto was smiling. Sasuke screamed and clung to her life as Naruto abruptly plunged straight down, exiting her drive and then launching herself back into the air while performing a barrel roll, a loop, and another dive. After that, Naruto emerged from her dive beneath the clouds once more and flew calmly. Sasuke began to laugh at the adrenaline and excitement of Naruto's wild flight, and Naruto's heart skipped a beat when she heard him laughing and having fun. Looking back, Naruto saw Sasuke grinning sincerely. Sasuke noticed that Naruto was staring at him once more, but he wasn't sure why, so Naruto looked closely into his eyes and saw that life had completely returned to them. Naruto's heart skipped a beat when she noticed that his eyes were glistening with life and joy. She quickly looked away from Sasuke and forward, and if it weren't for her eagle form, Sasuke would have noticed a deep red flush on Naruto's face. They soon arrived at the training ground, where Naruto dove stopped just before the ground and landed softly. Before Sasuke could dismount, Naruto changed into her human form, and he felt nothing below him drop hard on his ass. "Why you?" Before he tackled Naruto, Sasuke gave a playful shout. After rolling a few times and fighting over who would land on top, they finally stopped rolling, with Naruto emerging victorious and straddling Sasuke's hips while she sat up straight and kept her hands on his shoulders to hold him down. After a few minutes, both of them calmed down, with Naruto gazing intently into Sasuke's eyes, who reciprocated the intense gaze. Suddenly, they both started laughing from the joy and excitement of playing and having fun. Leaning down, Naruto brought her lips to Sasuke's, enjoyed the kiss, and felt Sasuke's tongue against her lips, requesting permission. Naruto opened her mouth, letting Sasuke spin his tongue around her mouth. As Sasuke put his arms around her waist, Naruto cupped his cheek and moaned as her tails moved down and began to rub and caress Sasuke's body, which he had to admit he really enjoyed. The kiss changed from a tender, loving kiss to a heated, more demanding kiss as Sasuke cupped Naruto's cheek with his hands and released a small, soft moan that she could still hear, making her start to heat up. Before Naruto could ask what Sasuke was doing, he re-engaged the kiss and used his tongue to explore her mouth, causing her to mutter and close her eyes once more. Sasuke surprised Naruto by rolling over so he was on top, causing her to yell in surprise. Two of Naruto's trails wrapped around Sasuke's waist, while the remaining ones continued to caress Sasuke's body. Naruto's hands moved up from cupping Sasuke's cheek, allowing her arms to slowly move up and wrap them around Sasuke's neck in an attempt to hold Sasuke closer to her. Cough. Cough. After breaking the kiss, Sasuke and Naruto turned to see who had broken their moment, and when they looked up, they saw Sakura standing next to Kakashi, her face deeply flushed, and Kakashi himself, grinning. Kakashi grinned and said, "As much as I enjoy the show, we have a few things that need to be discussed." Sakura walked and stood beside Naruto as Sasuke and Naruto stood up, both of them blushing a little. "So, once more, congratulations to you three. I am truly proud of you." Kakashi complimented his team, who were all grinning, saying, "Team 7 is the only team to have all 3 members make it to the main event. I'm sure all 3 of you want to train like there's no tomorrow for the next month." Naruto was about to respond when Kakashi said, "Unfortunately, I can't train all 3 of you." Kakashi prevented Naruto from speaking by raising his hand. "Allow me to finish. Sasuke, who shares many characteristics with me and possesses the Sharingan, will be my trainee. I arranged for others to train you, Sakura, Naruto. I'm not the best person to train you. These people are. In about an hour, Sakura Sensei will arrive." Before giving Naruto a piece of cloth, Kakashi explained, "You will have to find yours, Naruto." "Do you want me to find him?" Kakashi was deadpanned by Naruto. Kakashi said sheepishly, "Yep, only because I can't find him," which caused Naruto to complain in frustration. Both Naruto and Sasuke were upset when Kakashi said, "Sasuke, you better say goodbye to Naruto because we are leaving now and you won't see her or anyone else for a month." "I apologize to Naru-chan, but it appears that we will have to reschedule our date." Sasuke put his arms around Naruto's waist and whispered to her, "I'll make sure to make it up to you. It's better that you make it up." After saying, "Train hard, Sasuke-kun, and I'll see you in a month," Naruto gave Sasuke a passionate kiss. Before they both vanished in a whirl of dust and leaves, Kakashi put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder. Naruto was already beginning to miss him, but she was eager to see how much stronger he would be upon his return. Naruto put her hands on Sakura's shoulders and inquired, "How are you feeling, Sakura?" "Thanks, I'm fine." Sakura answered with a kind little smile. "Kakashi did talk to me about it." "It's good to hear that." Naruto gently embraced Sakura and said, "If you ever need anything, just let me know." "Yes, I will. Thank you, Naruto. Your presence back there was really helpful." Returning the hug, Sakura expressed her gratitude for her friend in Naruto, saying, "I don't know how I can repay you for this." "Sakura, it's a pleasure for me." Sakura became a little intrigued when Naruto said, "You don't have to repay me for anything, though there is one thing I do want you to do. Mend your relationship with Ino. I don't want to witness that between you two because you were best friends." Naruto retreated to gaze into Sakura's eyes and remarked, "Good friends are hard to come by and life is too short to throw something like that away." "Yes, I will. It's my responsibility to apologize. I am the one who caused us to part ways," Sakura uttered sorrowfully. "It doesn't matter who did what as long as one of you are willing to forgive each other and let your friendship grow even stronger than it was before," Naruto said with a nod. Naruto advised Sakura, who was eager to go find her sensei, to train hard and give Sasuke a run for his money. "Yes, I will," Sakura said, feeling much happier than she had before. "I'll show him and you what I am made of." Naruto said, "Cheers Sakura, I'll see you around," and then he rushed away. Market district of Konoha. Naruto is currently running in circles around the market district because she has caught this person's scent and is following it. Naruto began to grow irritated and thought, What the hell is this guy doing? I have been running in circles for ages. When Naruto kept following the tail, she discovered that it was returning to the village entrance where she had begun. Oh for. Naruto thought, growing increasingly irritated. Nya, this guy is really starting to annoy me. Naruto followed the scent and realized where she was going, so she transformed into a fox and ran much faster to catch up with this guy as soon as she passed the village gate. In the hopes that he wouldn't be inside, Naruto thought, this leads to a hot spring. When the scent led her to the area behind the hot spring, Naruto was a little taken aback. She continued to walk slowly in search of her new sensei and saw someone peeking through a small opening as she turned the corner of the hot spring. It dawned on Naruto that this was the individual she was seeking. Naruto, who was not impressed with Kakashi, thought, damn you Kakashi. What kind of joke this is? When Naruto transformed into her true fox form, she was at least 3 stories tall, not nearly as large as Kurama, but she was getting close. Her gold blonde fur gleamed in the sunlight, and her 5 tails ceased to wave and stayed motionless. Seeing that his man was dressed in a long sleeveless red cloak over a light brown-green long-sleeved shirt and long pants with brown wood sandals, Naruto silently approached the man who was peeking at her. Naruto began to growl loudly as she approached the man, who had a large green and red scroll on his lower back that was partially obscured by his long, white, spiky hair. Naruto watched the man freeze, then slowly turn his head around. Naruto growled louder but did not release any killing intent, and the man quickly turned his entire body around when he saw him, then backed up until he was directly against the wall behind him. Oh no. With a pale face and a phony beseeching smile, the man said. After changing into her human form, Naruto collapsed on the ground, giggling uncontrollably. When Naruto exclaimed, ha 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 ha, the man blinked a few times and turned to face Naruto. What the devil? The man spoke in a bewildered tone. Hee. You ought to. Have you ever noticed how precious the look on your face as that makes you laugh? Naruto said, paused by a chuckle. What? The man said, I'm not sure why, but I'm still a little pale, but he was perplexed by what was happening. Hey, you jerk. I was seriously frightened by you. Naruto laughed even harder when the man yelled angrily at her. Naruto calmed down after a few minutes and picked herself up off the floor as the man muttered and complained about the lack of respect that today's youth have for their elders. You are the one who is supposed to train me, according to Kakashi. However, I only see an arrow. GG, Naruto stated bluntly. Kakashi. At what time did Kakashi receive a weight Naruto? Before his eyes widened and he realized who was standing in front of him, the man said. Yes, that is me. Who are you, then? Naruto grinned as she spoke. The man grinned and said, I'm glad you asked, before leaping over Naruto and turning to look at her. Naruto spun around in an attempt to discover the activities of this peculiar pervert. Remember Mount Myobokugama Master Sennin, also called Gamma Sennin? The Gamma Sennin yelled as he leapt to his feet and clapped them, then landed in a position where his feet were off the ground and his hand was above and in front of his. Say, Sennin? Naruto questioned the strange elderly man as her eyes twitched and her perspiration fell. Yes, that's me, the man said, straightening his posture. So, what are you doing, Arrow? Sennin. The old man was reminded of some painful memories when Naruto asked in a sweet manner. The Gamma Sennin shivered slightly and said, I was working and don't call me that, before yelling the final line. Are you at work? A little perplexed, Naruto inquired. Yes, I work. The Gamma Sennin pulled out an all too familiar orange book and said, I'm a writer and I'm working on a novel. Nya. Kakashi. Reads that damn perverted book, Naruto yelled, gesturing to the book. Oh, you are aware of my Icha paradise, then, it's becoming quite well known, the Gamma Sennin grinned and said proudly. Nyaa, Arrow. Sennin, you damn you, this book is filthy. The Gamma Sennin's eye twitched as Naruto yelled. Work? What do you mean? You pervert, all you did was peek into a women's bath. Naruto persisted in yelling. Bakemono. Peeping inspires me to write better, and I'm not just a pervert. The Gamma Sennin responded with a shout. Usotsuke. What a weak justification. Naruto yelled angrily at this man. I spent ages trying to track you down, thinking it's some kind of training, only to find you peeping. Practicing? The Gamma Sennin inquired in a normal voice, a little bewildered. Naruto answered, yes, training. Kakashi. Said that you would train me. I don't train obnoxious, sly gakis like you, though. While examining Naruto's body closely, the Gamma Sennin remarked, "Even if you were a hot babe." Pervert pedophilia. Naruto's shout caused the Gamma Sennin's eye to twitch a couple of times. "I'm not interested in that," he quickly shot back. "How about this, then?" As Naruto said this, he assumed a pose that the Gamma Sennin interpreted as a stance. "I'm Sennin. You obnoxious Gaki, I'm not foolish enough to fall for your tricks," the Gamma Sennin said, twitching his eyes. Naruto changed into a 20-year-old version of herself, removing the clothes so that the man could see her gorgeous body, which included long, thin, firm legs, a flat, smooth stomach, and full double E-cup breasts. "I like you." With both thumbs raised and a large smile on his face, the Gamma Sennin said, his nose bleeding. Deadpanning at the man, Naruto thought, "He's an idiot. Oh my god. Are you going to train me now?" Biting her finger and allowing her tails to graze her entire body, Naruto said in a seductive manner. "Yes, but only under one condition," the man said, gesturing with his index finger. "State?" Naruto posed a seductive question. "Yes." The man grinned and said, "You will stay this way when you are in my presence." A pervert. As she transformed back into her normal form and put her clothes back on, Naruto yelled. "No, I'm not just a pervert," the Gamma Sennin retorted vigorously. "Yes, exactly," crossing her arms, Naruto said, "I don't believe this guy. I'm an incredibly pervert," with a spooky, strange look on his face, the Gamma Sennin yelled. "He freely acknowledges it, the insane bastard," Naruto thought, perspiring at this insane individual. "Aside from jokes, I will train you, yes. Thus, prepare to be put through a lot by the legendary Jiraiya. Sama." Jiraiya smirked as he said, taking the statement seriously. "Jiraiya? You mean?" Naruto said, and then her eyes widened. "Yes, Jiraiya, Densetsu no Sanin." While holding his thumb up, Jiraiya spoke. Naruto deadpanned at Jiraiya, making someone sneeze. "So the first Sanin I meet is a pedophilia snake with an identity problem, and now the second one I meet is a pedophilia perverted toad. What's the third one? A drunken slug?" Naruto asked. Jiraiya yelled back, "I'm not into that," while sporting a tick mark on his forehead. Naruto said, "Yay yay whatever you say," which caused Jiraiya's eye to twitch. Then Jiraiya turned around and left. "Follow me, we are going to start your training," she said. Practice Area 15. Jiraiya said, "Before we start, you should know that Kakashi told me everything about you, including Kyuubi and your father," which somewhat surprised Naruto. Naruto said, "So he really did tell you everything," as she made a bunshin. After changing into Minato, the bunshin grinned at Jiraiya. Minato smiled and said, "Sensei, it's good to see you again." Jiraiya said, "Minato, it really is you," incredulously. Minato nodded and said, "Yes, it's me, Sensei," before turning to Naruto. After hearing her father say, "Sensei," Naruto inquired, "Sensei?" "Yep, he was my Jonin instructor," revealed Minato. Jiraiya called out to Naruto, "Now get back to your training before we get sidetracked here. We don't have a lot of time." Jiraiya said, "This first one shouldn't take long," as he laid the big scroll on his back on the ground and unfolded it. Naruto noticed a list of names with each person's handprint below. Naruto noticed that Jiraiya and her father were the final two. "This is the contract for the toads of Mount Myobokugama. With this you can summon toads to aid you in battle," Jiraiya said. Jiraiya instructed Naruto to write her name after biting her thumb. "Write your name here in blood like the rest," she said. Jiraiya clarified, "Instead of concentrating on your chakra control, both Minato and I will be teaching you jutsus that can make use of your chakra reserves," as Naruto signed the agreement. When Naruto was done signing the contract, Jiraiya rolled it up and laid it on his back. "To summon, bite you thumb and spread the blood across your palm before going through the hand seals. I, Inu, Tori, Saru and Hitsuji. Like this," Jiraiya said. Before passing through the hand seals and slamming his hand to the ground, Jiraiya bit his thumb. Jiraiya yelled, "Ninpo! Kachiyose no Jutsu!" as black lines appeared under his hand. When the smoke cleared and Naruto saw him standing atop a large toad roughly the size of Jiraiya and Minato, Jiraiya vanished in a puff of smoke. After Naruto grinned and said, "Wow, that's cool," Jiraiya fell to the ground and the toad vanished in a cloud of smoke. "Now you try. Remember you need the blood as a sacrifice and pour as much chakra as you can into the jutsu," Jiraiya said. Naruto nodded, then proceeded to go through the hand seals, poured in as much chakra as she could. and slammed her hand down on the ground after biting her thumb and spreading the blood across her palm. Naruto exclaimed, "Ninpo! Kachiyose no Jutsu!" before a huge cloud of smoke materialized, and Minato and Jiraiya vanished, both of them aware of who Naruto had called forth. Jiraiya told Minato, "I didn't think she could get him on the first try. You only managed on your third try." Minato rubs the back of his head and laughs awkwardly. "Well, she is talented and has a lot of chakra," he said. Naruto landed on something hard after the smoke cleared, then looked forward to see two large eyes staring at her. The enormous orange toad, which was about the same size as Shukaku and Kurama, had Naruto on its nose. The toad has a huge sword on his hip and an open shirt. With a loud voice, the toad asked, "Who are you, and where is Jiraiya? He has some nerve summoning me after the last time," as it searched for it. Naruto stood up and said, "I'm the one who summoned you, and I don't know where Senin is." According to the toad, Senin, bahahaha, good name for the old man kid, it laughed. Naruto was asked by the toad, "So why did he summon me?" Naruto said somewhat irritatedly, "Are you deaf? I'm the one who summoned you." "You?" Sniff. Sniff. With a hint of rage in his voice, the toad asked, "What is Jiraiya thinking allowing your kind to sign the contract?" Looking directly into the toad's eye, Naruto questioned sharply, "My kind? Why do you have a problem with my kind?" The toad narrowed his eyes at Naruto and said, "You have some nerve speaking to me in such a tone, filth. And yes, I have a problem. Your kind is nothing but a bunch of degraded demons that live for the thrill of death and destruction. Filth? Oi, you piece of shit. I'm not some stain or plague. You have no right to judge someone before you have even attempted to get to know the person. I may be a Hanyu, but that doesn't mean I'm some evil thing that wants to destroy things," Naruto responded with an angry voice. "Why you dare speak to Gamabunta like that? Why should I care? You and your kind bring and care for nothing but death and destruction, even more so than demons," Gamabunta said in a low, threatening voice. Ignoring Gamabunta's tone, Naruto responded, "Don't care who you are. I'm not some destruction-hungry creature. Senin allowed me to sign the contract and I summoned you." Gamabunta threatened Naruto by saying, "I don't care, I will never accept you as my summoner or master. Now get off me before I make you." Jiraiya said, "Gamabunta, that's enough," touching Gamabunta's head. Gamabunta asked Jiraiya, "What is the meaning of this, allowing that to summon me?" in a tone that was less menacing. Not pleased with Gamabunta, Jiraiya remarked, "That girl is Minato's daughter, and do you really think I would just let anyone sign the contract?" Gamabunta questioned, "How is she a Hanyu? Last I checked both Minato and Kushina were human," while Naruto pondered Kushina's identity. Yes, they were human. Naruto used to be human, but due to her having Kyuubi sealed in her she had to be turned into a Hanyu, else she would have died, Jiraiya clarified. Gamabunta questioned, "Wait, this is the kid Minato sealed Kyuubi in?" "Yes, she is. Minato would be very disappointed in you. Now will you still allow her to summon you or not?" Jiraiya replied. Naruto stated bluntly, "Don't bother. I don't care," for his answer, before turning around and moving in the direction of Gamabunta's nose. Jiraiya yelled, "Naruto, wait," which caused Naruto to halt and turn to look at her. "Why? I don't need someone like him as my summon. Even if he will allow me, it's only because he now knows who my father is. I hate people like him who are quick to judge and label others just because of what they are," Naruto responded as he pointed out Gamabunta. "I didn't ask to be turned into a Hanyu, and I certainly didn't ask to have Kyuubi sealed in me. Even after all the stories I have heard about Kyuubi, I still didn't judge him and saw him for who he is, not what he isn't or is perceived to be," Naruto screamed with rage. She was extremely worn out and irritated by everyone's constant labeling and judgment. At this point, Gamabunta was feeling guilty and Jiraiya was quiet. "Say he allowed me to summon him or other toads. What's to stop them from doing what he did when I first summoned him?" Naruto yelled. "I am the chief summon of Mount Myobokuzan and all the toads trust my judgment in who I allow to summon them," replied Gamabunta. He went on to say, "I, Gamabunta of Mount Myobokuzan, will allow you to summon the toads of Mount Myobokuzan," which caused Jiraiya to smile. Naruto asked impassively, "But why? I thought I was filth and that you didn't care and would never accept me as your summoner, so why now?" "Because Jiraiya finds you worthy and I trust his judgment in who he allows to sign the contract," replied Gamabunta. "If you really trusted Jiraiya's word and judgment, then we wouldn't be having this problem. Besides, why should I summon you and your toads? For power. Don't need or want it. I'm looking for strength." Naruto was not at all impressed. "For aid when I need it. I already have friends and Q. Chan for that, Naruto said. Naruto began to shout once more. Because it's a privilege. Screw you. I'll look somewhere else. So tell me, why should I summon you? She asked. Naruto, that's enough, Jiraiya stated firmly. Gamabunta said, shaking his head slowly. No, Jiraiya, she's right. I let my hatred and past cloud my judgment. I know that you would only allow someone you trust and see as worthy to sign the contract. As to why you should summon us, I don't have an answer for you, before lowering his head to let Jiraiya and Naruto get off. Before vanishing in a cloud of smoke, Gamabunta said, as I said, you are more than welcome to summon us if you so choose. Please accept my apology for how I acted, Naruto. And Jiraiya, I apologize for ever doubting your word. Naruto, just give Bunta a chance. The toads are the strongest summon you can get. Bunta does have a reason to hate Han Yus. His family and brother were killed by a group of them just for the pleasure of it, Jiraiya told Naruto. As Minato made her way to their location, Naruto responded, so, the death of my parents was because of some greedy human being who was looking for power, and I don't go insulting and judging humans. I'll give him another chance, but not now, I need to calm down first. Jiraiya nodded and wished for a smooth transition. Naruto wanted to start her training, so she asked, so what else do you have for training? Jiraiya pulled out a little piece of cloth and said to Naruto, you are going to double your regular fitness training now. A little perplexed, Naruto questioned, what's that for? Jiraiya saw Naruto's bewilderment and said, because Kakashi forgot to give you your weights back, you will be using this. It has a gravity seal on it. It acts the roughly same as a resistance seal, which is also on here, before handing her the paper. Jiraiya said, tie it around your arm so I can activate the seals, and Naruto followed her instructions by tying the seal around her right arm. Jiraiya activated the two seals on the cloth and created a half-Tora seal. Naruto was knocked to her knees and had to use her hands to keep her face from hitting the ground as soon as she felt the effects. Naruto attempted to move but found it extremely challenging because of the additional weight and resistance. Naruto tried to get to his feet slowly and exclaimed, "Ah, what the hell is this thing? The seals on there aren't your normal gravity and resistance seals. I have tuned them so that they will automatically increase weight and resistance as you start to get used to the current weight and resistance," Jiraiya explained as he observed Naruto slowly becoming upright. Jiraiya grinned, making Naruto's eyes widen. I estimate that it's like having your weights at around 350 kilograms apiece, so you weigh at around 1750 kilogram for your resistance. I'd say it makes it 10 times hard for you to move, Jiraiya said. In response to Jiraiya's statement, so hopped it. You need to do 2 sessions of your fitness training. This will give both Minato and I time to set out a training schedule for you, Naruto muttered and complained as he slowly left. Jiraiya held half of the Tora seal and increased the resistance and gravity seals on Naruto. Oh, what's that? Did you say increase the weight and resistance? Oh sure, here you go. Now you can enjoy 1875 kilograms and it's now 20 times harder for you to move, she said. After mentally cursing Jiraiya and stumbling back to the ground, Naruto slowly got back up and resumed her regular fitness regimen. After 4 hours, 2 of Naruto's fitness training sessions took an excruciating 4 hours to finish. Naruto returned slowly to Minato and Jiraiya, who were chatting and laughing a few times. With a, "I hate you," look on her face, Naruto halted in front of Jiraiya and her father. Jiraiya grinned and said, "That took a bit longer than you expected, didn't it?" as she noticed Naruto's eye twitch due to her apparent fatigue. Aware of what Jiraiya might do, Naruto remained silent. Jiraiya said, "You are going to finish your Lightning Seishitsu Henka training because we only have about 3 hours left to train. So make as many Bunshins as you can," to which Naruto nodded and sighed. Before about 2,000 Bunshin emerged in a cloud of smoke that covered the area with Naruto made a half-Tora seal. "Write the original, come with me, we will be doing additional training," Jiraiya said as she took her leave. Jiraiya and Minato stopped a few meters from Naruto's ocean, and Naruto followed them. Jiraiya said, now his next jutsu has 3 steps to it. The first step is rotation. To pass the first step you need to pop this water balloon. Here watch, as she opened several water balloons. Taking one of the water balloons, Jiraiya held it in one hand. The water balloon trembled for 2 seconds, stretching and retracting all over before bursting, leaving hardly any sign of the balloon or the water within. Jiraiya handed Naruto a water balloon and instructed her to use her chakra to make the water inside spin and burst. Naruto picked up the balloon, held it in her right hand, and then focused on turning the water counterclockwise. In the meantime, the balloon bulged out, becoming more oval in shape, as the rotation speed increased. Seeing that it hasn't popped yet, I continued to increase the speed. Naruto paused her chakra follow through to consider why the balloon wasn't popping. Why doesn't it pop? My appearance differs slightly from Ero Sennin's. I only had one bulge, but he had many. Naruto thought, I'll ask him to demonstrate again and see what I can learn from it. When Naruto looked up, he saw Jiraiya writing on a notepad while seated beneath a tree. Naruto approached Jiraiya, wondering in part what he was writing, but decided to put it off for the time being since there were more pressing issues to attend to. Naruto looked down at Jiraiya and said, Ero Sennin, could you please demonstrate it again? I want to see something. He complained as he got to his feet, don't call me that, damn it. Kids have no respect these days. Jiraiya complained, but Naruto ignored her and asked again, yay, so can you demonstrate again please? Jiraiya said, yes, just bring it here, and then she took the balloon from Naruto. Before the balloon burst with a little bang and began to bulge all over, Jiraiya focused for a while. Naruto closely observed in an attempt to determine what was different and how Jiraiya caused the balloon to swell in all directions. He causes it to protrude in arbitrary places, and the protuberances only last a brief period of time before moving on to other places. I got one continuous bulge while I was spinning the water in one direction, Naruto thought. So you happy now? Inquired Jiraiya. Naruto responded, yes, I think so, just before Jiraiya threw him another water balloon. Naruto used her chakra to make the water inside spin counter clockwise for a few seconds after catching the balloon. Yes, there is a single, continuous bulge. However, how can I make my chakra flow in multiple directions? Naruto gazed intently at the balloon and pondered. Hey Ero Sennin, how do I get my chakra to rotate in random direction at the same time? Replied Naruto. Jiraiya grinned and said, ho? So you figured that bit, did you? Well, you will have to figure that out for yourself. That took her only a few minutes to figure out. While Naruto returned to her training, Jiraiya pondered, she might just surpass you, Minato. While her Bunshins had successfully mastered her Lightning Seishitsu Henka training, they continued to practice for the next hour, while Naruto spent the next 3 hours trying to learn the first step of her new jutsu. Jiraiya gave Naruto an evil smile and said, all right, you can stop now. We'll continue this tomorrow and you better be here by 0500 hours. You don't want to know what will happen if you don't. Knowing what might happen if she complained, Naruto said, hi, without complaining. After a long and busy day, Naruto hurried home to unwind. The house of Kakashi and Naruto, it's quite without Kakashi.ni, Naruto sighed. Kurama said to Naruto, oi kid, I need to speak to you now, hurry up and enter the seal. Hi, murmured Naruto, wondering what was so crucial. Within the seal, after entering the seal, Naruto walked over to Kurama, sat down, and leaned against him. Naruto began to enjoy the company and pat one of Kurama's tails. While continuing to pat one of Kurama's tails, Naruto inquired, so what did you want to speak about? While you were talking to the old man, he said that Orochimaru was researching into immortality. I must tell you that to a degree you are immortal. Your demon half stops you from aging and becoming sick. Basically you cannot die from old age or diseases, Kurama said. At this, Naruto's eyes widened and he turned to Kurama. When you reach around 17 or 18 your body will stop aging so you won't get old or die from old age. That being said, you can still be killed, but it will be very difficult. With your regeneration added with mine you would have to be killed instantly or obliterated, Kurama continued. It took Naruto a few seconds to process the information before responding, well, that's good to know. So you are saying I should watch myself around that snake bastard? No, I am saying you are better off killing him, but that might be harder than you expected to be, Kurama replied. That's all I wanted to say about that. Now for the other reason. I will be teaching you a few new things. The first is how to access and control your demon chakra. You are currently using your human side chakra, Kurama stated with a grin. Now that you have defeated your evil self, you can now learn to control your demon chakra without losing yourself. Unlike your normal chakra, demon chakra is more destructive and more powerful in nature, but it's a lot harder to control or even use. Later, when you can control your demon chakra, I will teach you how to combine it with your human chakra, Kurama said. Again, Naruto was taken aback. So I have 2 sets of chakra I can use? Wow, that's useful, she said. When Kurama corrected Naruto, she smiled subtly. No, you have 3 sets, the third being mine, she said. Minato, can you make a seal that will stop chakra from escaping this room? The last thing we need is this village panicking when Naruto summons her demon chakra, Kurama said in a way that confused Naruto. Kurama kicked her out of the seal and returned her to reality before Naruto had a chance to ask. The room of Naruto in the real world. Naruto moaned aloud, "Hey Kurama, I was about to ask you something." In response to Naruto's implicit query, Kurama said, "I know what you were going to ask. Just like I can communicate with you, I can communicate with your father." As Minato emerged from the yellow flash that was directly in front of Naruto, her eyes widened at the sight of the jutsu that had made her father famous and feared. With stars in her eyes, Naruto said, "Please teach me how to do that, 2.san. That was really cool." When Minato asked, "Why do you think I had you studying all those Fuinjutsu books you got?" she smiled. "Yada!" exclaimed Naruto as he leapt to his feet. In just a few minutes, Minato completed putting all of the seals around the house after making a lot of them. Minato explained, "There, that will stop any and all chakra from escaping this room when activated. It will also stop people from seeing into the room, so remember to deactivate it when you are finished, before holding a half-Tora seal and triggering the seals. You should know how to activate and deactivate them. I will be with Jiraiya. See you tomorrow, Naru-chan." Minato laughed. Naruto waved and said, "Thank you, see you tomorrow, 2.san, before Minato vanished in a flash of yellow. Without allowing Naruto to gripe or complain about wanting to sleep, Kurama clarified, "Now that that's sorted, we can start your nighttime training. To access your demon chakra you must concentrate and find it. Just like you did when you first accessed your normal chakra. Once you have found it, pull on it." After crossing her legs and sitting down, Naruto closed her eyes and focused on locating her demon chakra. It took Naruto some time to locate her demon chakra, and she felt a little foolish for not noticing that her demon chakra was directly next to her normal chakra. Naruto began tugging on it and could feel the difference right away. She could sense the power surge beginning to flow through her body, and her demon chakra was more violent. Naruto could feel her strength growing until she could hardly feel the gravity seal's effects on her. As her canines and claws lengthened, her senses also become more acute. Her whisker birthmarks darkened and became more noticeable, and her hair and fur grew wilder. When Naruto opened her eyes, her blue eyes gave way to gold ones. When Naruto looked into the mirror in front of her, she noticed that her fur and hair had turned a deeper shade of gold than before. What has happened here is that you have now switched from using your normal chakra to using your demon chakra. You could say that this is your demon mode. To go back to normal, stop pulling on your demon chakra and pull on your human one instead, Kurama clarified. Drawing on her human chakra, Naruto focused. The blue hue of Naruto's eyes returned to normal, and her hair, claws, canines, and whisker birthmarks all returned to normal. Naruto's senses dulled and she felt a lot of strength leave her body. Naruto remarked, "Wow, that was quite the rush," genuinely noticing the change now that she was utilizing her human chakra once more. "Yes, it is. That's why if you don't defeat your evil self you will lose yourself in that rush and go on a rampage. If you ever run out of human chakra you can switch to your demon chakra or switch to your human chakra should you run out of demon chakra," Kurama clarified. However, Naruto only recalled one instance in which she nearly ran out of chakra, but I have yet to actually run out of chakra. The only time I came close was when Kakashi really pushed me while I got used to using my K's no Yoroi, she said. Kurama's response, "We will have to change that, won't we?" made Naruto a little anxious about what was about to happen. Kurama gave Naruto an assignment for the following hour. Continue to switch between your human and demon chakra for the next hour. You must be able to change instantly and on the go. Naruto practiced switching between her two chakras for the next hour. It was simpler now that she knew where her demon chakra was, but switching between the two still required concentration. Naruto had made some progress by the end of the hour, but not as much as she had hoped and anticipated. Kurama told Naruto, "That's enough for now, kid. You need rest for tomorrow. Trust me, you are going to need all the rest you can get," as the training session came to an end. Naruto swallowed, probably anticipating a long and difficult day. The following day, Training Ground 15. Naruto was careful to arrive at the training ground just prior to the time allotted. She was a little stiff and sore, but not from the training and fight from yesterday. No, because of the gravity pulling on her, she had partially forgotten that she weighs 1875 kilograms. Only after climbing onto her bed did she remember that fact. Her bed wasn't designed to support such large weights, she found out. She no longer has a bed, so she had to sleep on the floor after her bed gave way and collapsed on her. Naruto observed Jiraiya and her father approaching her as they conversed. Naruto patiently awaited their arrival before noticing the moon behind them and recalling what would occur in roughly a week. The moon will soon be full. Naruto sighed and thought, this is going to be interesting. Knowing Kakashi's tendency to be late, Jiraiya remarked, "Good to see you are here early. At least you haven't picked up Kakashi's habit of being late." Minato laughed and remarked, "Yeah, I still can't believe it. He was the one who was always early and reprimanding Obito for being late." Naruko was shocked to learn that Kakashi used to be early and reprimand someone else for being late. She nearly assumed they were referring to someone else. "Kakashi early? Though he is only on time when he trains us," she said. Before pondering whether Jiraiya was aware of it, Naruko remarked, "Oh, I should tell you it's full moon next week sometime. Kakashi did tell you about that?" Jiraiya grinned mischievously and said, "Yes, as I mentioned, he told me everything, and I mean everything, including a certain Uchiha, as he prepared to conduct what he refers to as some research." Naruko blushed slightly, but it vanished when she saw Jiraiya's face. With an equally charming smile, Naruko said, "I hope you are not considering using us for your search. G.Rai. Ya.sen.say?" Naruko's tone made Jiraiya and Minato shudder, and they both remembered a certain redhead in a few terrifying ways. Jiraiya quickly nodded, perspiring a little because she knew Naruko would carry out any threats she made. No, there is no way I would think of that," Jiraiya smiled nervously. "Right now on to your training schedule. First you will start off with doing 2 fitness sessions followed by chakra control exercises. Then you will come to me while a bunshin will go with your father. You will then end the day with another 2 fitness sessions," Jiraiya explained to Naruko her training routine. Jiraiya said, "So hop 2, start running and so on," which caused Naruko to start immediately. In order to begin her daily fitness routine of running around the village as quickly and for as long as she can, Naruko began running to the village wall. Naruko performed 200 push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, handstand push-ups, and punches and kicks with each arm and leg after finishing the run. She then performed 200 pull-ups and push-ups with one hand on each hand. Pulling up 1,875 kilograms on one arm made the pull-ups a little more difficult, Naruko had to admit. Finding a tree branch that could support the weight, however, was the most difficult aspect. After giving up, Naruko created a bunshin that changed shape to become a monkey bar. Naruko didn't want to go around shattering every branch in her immediate vicinity or waste time looking for one that was strong enough. After finishing, she began the process anew. 4 hours later, after her 4-hour dual fitness session, which she largely completed by running until she passed out, Naruko headed back. Naruko approached Jiraiya with a question. Naruko wanted to create a fire and lightning version of her chakra armor, so she asked, "Nay arrow. Senin, can I still make a bunch of cage bunshins and have them do other things as well?" "I was just about to suggest that. So while you do chakra control exercises, you bunshins can do something else," Jiraiya replied with a wink. Jiraiya's mouth fell open in shock as Naruko grinned and then made 2,000 bunshins. From what Kakashi had told him, Jiraiya knew Naruko could build an army on her own, but witnessing her do it and hearing about it are two entirely different things. Naruko yelled, "Line up!" and all of her bunshins formed 4 groups of 10 rows, each with 50 bunshins. Jiraiya deadpanned at Naruko and asked no one in particular, "Is she preparing for war now? Everyone on my left is group fire and everyone on my right is group lightning. Remember to create a bunshin before dispelling yourself every half hour. Spread out, you all know what to do," Naruko yelled as she gave her bunshins. The Naruko bunshins all dispersed in various directions to carry out their assigned tasks. Jiraiya simply sighed and shook his head. Minato rubbed the back of his head and laughed uneasily. Minato smiled softly and said, "Naruko really takes after her mother, doesn't she?" Jiraiya remarked, "Yeah, she does, and she's just as scary as her mother," before shuddering, still unable to shake off some rather gruesome and terrifying memories. Jiraiya complained that Naruko should be able to do something that took him months or years to finish, saying, "Even though this is cheating using her cage bunshins like this, it took us ages to get where we are." With tears streaming from his eyes toward the end, Jiraiya went on, "I mean, have you ever heard of anyone mastering an element in a few months, let alone a genin mastering 3? Hell, not many jonins can use 3 or more elements. This just isn't fair." Naruko approached Jiraiya and her father, who were crying as they awaited the next phase of her training. With a drop of perspiration, Naruko questioned, "What's wrong with Arrow, Senin?" Jiraiya pointed to the waterfall behind him with his thumb and said, "Don't call me that, anyway. You see the waterfall behind me?" When Naruko saw the rather tall waterfall, he said, "Yes, what about it?" According to Naruko, it was about 5 stories high. Before revealing a big black rectangular box and a length of rope, Jiraiya stated, You will walk up the waterfall while pulling this using a combination of the tree climbing and water walking exercise. Before tying the other end of the rope around Naruto's waist, Jiraiya tied the first end around the box. Jiraiya smirked and said, "There you go, now get climbing," to Naruto. Naruto began to walk, but was unable to continue and stopped. Naruto glanced over her shoulder before pulling the rope with her hands. Naruto grunted as he attempted to pull the box, but it remained stationary. She made another attempt to pull the box, this time using all of her strength and body weight. Naruto stopped pulling and turned to face a smiling Jiraiya after catching the box and slowly shifting closer to her. With a perplexed expression on her face, Naruto questioned, "What the hell is that thing? Better yet, what kind of rope is this?" Jiraiya responded with a smile that never left his face, "That's just a box that weighs around 4,000 kilograms, and that is a special rope that was made with chakra and a few other things." Naruto said simply, "Gee, thanks," as her eye flickered a few times. To make pulling the box easier, Naruto sent chakra to her arms and legs. She dragged the box behind her as she walked slowly to the waterfall. Pulling the damn box got a little more difficult when it hit the water. Naruto was glad the river was shallow because otherwise she might end up at its bottom. The fact that Naruto now had to ascend the waterfall was her next challenge. She managed to stay attached to the waterfall by taking a few cautious steps up it, pointing out that climbing a waterfall was far more difficult than climbing a wall. In order to reach the point where she would have to begin pulling the box, Naruto took a few more steps. She took very slow steps up the waterfall, grunting as she slowly pulled up the heavy box. Naruto had to use her hands to hold and raise the box, so she was walking backwards up the waterfall. Naruto ascended the waterfall gradually, her steps steady but slow. She noticed that she was about 2 stories above the ground before turning to see that she had 3 more stories to go. Jiraiya and Minato observed Naruto as she ascended gradually and realized she was almost at the summit. Jiraiya yelled, "When you reach the top you must walk back down the waterfall," to which Naruto complained to her insane sensei. Despite the extremely slow process, Naruto succeeded. She paused and then carefully descended, observing that it would be much more difficult to descend. Because she didn't want to discover what would happen if she didn't, Naruto took care to walk steadily and carefully. When Naruto finally reached the bottom, she sat down in the water and inhaled deeply a few times. When Naruto got to the bottom, she was pretty breathless. Naruto muttered to herself, "That took quite a bit out of me, not to mention the slight backlash from my bunchins dispelling didn't help," as she took a brief break to catch her breath. Jiraiya congratulated Naruto when he arrived at her and then instructed her on what to do next. "Well done, Naruto, that took you about an hour to do. You can rest for half an hour, then I want to go up and down the waterfall again," Jiraiya said. With a sigh, Naruto lay down on her back in the river and allowed the water to flow past her, which helped her stay cool. Lying in the river and gazing up at the clouds, Naruto contentedly relaxed and rested. Naruto soon realized why Shikamaru enjoyed doing this constantly. Before she knew it, Jiraiya had yelled at Naruto to get up and begin climbing, signaling the end of her half-hour. With a sigh, Naruto stood up again and turned to the waterfall. Naruto walked up and down the waterfall for an additional hour and a half. Because it was a little more difficult than the first time, Naruto took a little longer this time. Naruto dragged the box behind her as she reached the bottom and proceeded to where Jiraiya and her father were. After untying the rope around her waist, Naruto looked up at Jiraiya, who was waiting for her next command. Naruto began, "Arrow. Senin, what's nay," before collapsing forward, feeling as though all of her strength and power had been taken away. Before everything went dark and silent, Naruto hardly heard Jiraiya call her name or felt him catch her. Later on, with a groan, Naruto opened her eyes slowly and stretched, causing her back to arch slightly. Naruto opened her eyes wide, looked around, and realized she was in her room. Naruto pondered how she had gotten her, but then she realized she had been about to ask Jiraiya what would happen next before she fainted. Naruto felt a weight on her stomach as she attempted to sit up. Sakura was slouched on a chair with her head resting on Naruto's stomach when Naruto looked down. With a soft smile, Naruto ran her hand through Sakura's hair. When Naruto saw that her bed was in one piece, she questioned whether it had been repaired or if it was brand new. After waking up and sensing a gentle touch on her hair, Sakura lifted her head and looked at Naruto. Sakura said, "Naruto, you alright? I was worried a bit there," abruptly and fully conscious. Naruto smiled and said, "Hey Sakura-chan, yeah, I'm fine thanks. Though what happened?" Sakura sighed in relief and said, "I'm not sure, Jiraiya. Sama said you suddenly passed out during training." I arrived shortly after you passed out hoping to have a lunch break with you. Naruto sat up and said, sorry about that Sakura-chan. How long was I out for? You have been out just under 2 days. We were getting worried but then I remember the last time this happened which calmed us down somewhat, replied Sakura. Naruto answered somewhat dejectedly, I see. Damn, I hoped I didn't disturb you training like I did mine. Sakura shook her head and said, hey, don't worry about it. It's only 2 days, and there's still a month till the main event. Naruto said, yeah, I know. I just want to make good use of this time, as she turned and put her feet down. Sakura smiled and said, I know you do, and so do I, as Naruto got to his feet. She was only dressed in a light orange, partially see-through gown that hung down to her mid-thighs, Naruto observed. Before recalling who was currently training her, Naruto pondered how she got into these clothes. With hope, Naruto said, Sakura-chan, how did I get into these clothes? Oh, I changed you into them seeing that the clothes you were in were completely soaked. And you were quite dirty and sweaty so I gave you a bath, replied Sakura. With a sigh of relief, Naruto said, oh thank you. I was a little worried that Ero-sennin was behind this. Ero-sennin? Sakura inquired, somewhat perplexed. Naruto looked at Sakura and remarked, yeah, it's what I call Jiraiya-sensei. Don't be fooled by his acts, he is a pervert and he openly admits it. You know you should give him more respect. He is a famous, well-known ninja and without a doubt the strongest in Konoha, Sakura whispered to Naruto. She's right you know. You should respect your elders, Jiraiya said as she stood outside Naruto's door. In response, Naruto stuck her tongue out at Jiraiya. Jiraiya said, get changed and meet me in the living room, and then she left. Sakura rose and left the room, making her way toward the living room. Before entering the living room, Naruto changed into a long black pair of slightly baggy pants and a red baggy shirt. After entering the living room, Naruto went to the kitchen to grab a bite to eat. Naruto pulled a few ingredients out of the refrigerator and asked, anyone want anything? Jiraiya said, no but thanks for the offer, and shook his head. Sakura smiled and said, thanks Naru but I already had something. Naruto said, fine suit yourself. More for me then, and then she turned to make herself something. In an attempt to validate her suspicions, Sakura began counting Naruto's tails. Sakura declared, hey Naruto, you have a 6th tail now, after tallying Naruto's tails. Naruto paused her activity and turned to face the back. Naruto joyfully replied, oh look, seems I do, while clutching her new tail. Sakura and Jiraiya perspired as they wondered how Naruto had failed to notice her new tail. After carrying her bowl of food, Naruto sat down beside Sakura, took a bite, and glanced at Jiraiya, curious to see what he had to say. So according to what you have told Kakashi, when you get a new tail your strength, chakra and senses increase and that you get an additional perk with that tail. Do you know what perk you get with this tail and by how much your strength, chakra and senses have increased by? Jiraiya wanted to know more about this Hanyu tail company. No, I don't know what I got with this tail other than I can talk in my fox form now. As for the increase in my abilities, I'd say it doubled them. Well, that's what happened the last few times I got a new tail, Naruto replied after a moment's reflection. Jiraiya grinned and said, I see. We can step your training up a few notches, which caused Naruto to swallow. After saying, I shall see you tomorrow at the same time and place, Jiraiya stood up and made her way to the door. Naruto wanted to start training immediately and chase after Jiraiya, so he asked, wait, why can't we train now? Jiraiya answered, because it's getting late. The sun set about an hour ago just so you know, and then she left, shutting the door behind her. And there he goes, Naruto sighed as he made his way back to Sakura's seat. Naruto took a seat again, raised her feet, and turned to face Sakura while embracing her knees. Sakura crossed her legs and turned to face Naruto. Thanks Sakura for taking such good care of me, Naruto said earnestly. Sakura leaned forward slightly and put her hands on Naruto's knees. No need, it's the least I can do. You've always been there for me so I wanted to return the favor, she said. After giving Sakura a gentle smile in return, Naruto put her hands on top of hers. Naruto asked in a lighthearted manner, so who did Kakashi get to train you? Sakura replied, he first got someone by the name of Ebisu to train me, unsure of how to feel about the man. Sakura went on, shivering at the realization of Anko. I'm not exactly sure what happened but Anko the second exam protractor is now training me. That lady is crazy, she said. Wondering how Sakura managed to pull this off, Naruto said, Yay Anko is real crazy. How did you get her to train you? The memory caused Sakura to blush quite a bit, raising Naruto's eyebrow as he wondered why Sakura was blushing so much. "Sakura?" inquired Naruto curiously. Sakura replied, "I didn't do anything, she just offered to train me. Of course I accepted, but when I asked why she, but she was unable to finish because she began to blush intensely and shake her head angrily." Naruto asked, "Sakura, why are you blushing so hard?" But he had a hunch that it was Anko they were referring to. Sakura responded, "She's worse than Kakashi in that book he reads," while still slightly flushed. With a sigh and a slight flush, Naruto remarked, "I suppose she is thinking that ever since she saw me, she has been attempting to get into my pants." Sakura whispered, "That's mine included, as well." Sakura blushed as Naruto laughed at her. Sakura whispered, "Hey Naru, after the exams could you help me with something please?" A little perplexed by Sakura's shift in body language, Naruto said, "Yeah, sure. What is it you want me to help you with?" Sakura sadly recalled what Ino had done for her in the past and asked, "Could you help me repair what little friendship I have with Ino?" "You bet I will," Naruto grinned broadly in response. Sakura leaned in and hugged Naruto, grinning softly. "Thank you Naru. I couldn't ask for a better friend," Sakura said. Sakura withdrew, ending the embrace after Naruto gave it back and held it for a few minutes. Sakura got to her feet, stretched, and let out a long yawn, exhausted from her rather demanding day. Sakura said as she walked to the door and put her shinobi sandals back on, "Thanks Naru, but I better get going, don't want my mother getting worried." Naruto stood up, approached Sakura, and placed a hand on her shoulder. Naruto said, "Here, let me. I don't want to out alone at this time of night," preventing Sakura from opening the door. Sakura said, "I can handle myself you know," with a headshake. Saying, "No, I insist," Naruto stopped Sakura from leaving by putting her tail around her waist. They both vanished in a puff of smoke before Sakura could speak, only to reappear directly in front of her house. Sakura covered her mouth because she was still feeling sick and wasn't used to traveling that way. Sakura laughed when Naruto said, "See, we're already here," with a broad smile. Sakura said, "Thanks Naru. I'll see you tomorrow," and then she quickly embraced Naruto. Naruto waved to Sakura as she ascended the stairs to her house. "Sure Sakura-chan. See you tomorrow," she said. Before entering her house, Sakura waved one final time. On the other hand, Naruto vanished in a whirlpool of dust and leaves before resurfacing on the apartment roof where she and Kakashi reside. Jumping down, Naruto climbed through the window of her bedroom and landed on her bed. Excited for her training tomorrow, Naruto fell asleep as soon as her head touched her pillow. Shortly after receiving her apartment, Naruto learned that nothing compares to a restful night's sleep. Naruto always loved to sleep, but no matter how exhausted she was or how late she went to bed, she was never able to fall asleep. It felt like deja vu every morning, and the bird singing happily outside her window didn't make it any better. "Damn bird," was Naruto's groan. Naruto whispered, "You always sing the same tune at the same time every morning," and then she slammed her window open and frantically waved her arms to shoo the bird away. "Apparently the damn bird moved with me," Naruto remarked, sighing in frustration as he shut the window. After 30 minutes, Naruto was in a predicament that took some time to comprehend. She was on her way to the gates for her weekly hunt when she last remembered it. She is currently racing through the village with two vivacious green blurs. Lee apparently learned a lot from his sensei Guy, as he came up with the brilliant idea to challenge her to almost anything, just like Guy does with her brother Kakashi, who is not related to her. For this reason, she is currently competing against Lee and Guy to see who can go faster. At first, she was going to say no, that is, until she learned that she would receive a complimentary all-you-can-eat ramen from her favorite ramen stand if she won. At the moment, Naruto is cursing her addiction to ramen. The winner was the person who completed 20 laps around the village in the quickest time. At first, it was just going to be her and Lee, but Guy soon joined, saying that if he didn't, his youthful flames would go out. Right now, all three were on their 18th lap, getting closer to the starting line for their 19th lap, which is indicated by Konoha's main entrance. Right now, Naruto is in second place, just behind Guy, and Lee is in third place, not far behind her. Azumo and Katetsu had just arrived to begin their shift when they passed the main entrance and saw a green blur, followed by a black and yellow blur, and then another green blur. Azumo shook his head and chuckled as he remarked, "Looks like Guy challenged Kakashi to another challenge and Lee decided to join in." Katetsu looked perplexed and said, "But I thought Kakashi was out the village training that Uchiha kid?" Azumo and Katetsu wondered, then who was that black and yellow blur? About 10 minutes later, The answer arrived in the form of a cloud of dust and a loud, yet all too familiar, shout. Yada. Free ramen. Bellowed the voice. When the dust cloud swiftly cleared, a bouncing Naruto and a dejected looking Guy and Lee were visible. Yash Naruto, that was a most youthful race, Guy said, grinning and giving Naruto the thumbs up. Man, you guys are fast. Naruto smiled in response. That was a close one. Lee gave Naruto her prize and then bounded off to perform his push-ups. Yash, we are currently 1.0 to you, Naruto. As promised, you get a free all.you.can.eat ramen ticket. And now I will do 500 push-ups, and if I can't do that I will do 1000 sit-ups, Lee yelled. Guy cheerfully said, Yash Naruto, we shall see you around sometime, while continuing to hold up his thumb, and then he vanished to follow his pupil. Before rushing off to go train with Jiraiya and her father, Naruto casually waved to the two guards who had their jaws on the ground as she passed them. Azumo tried to comprehend what had happened for a few minutes before asking, what just happened? With a stunned expression on his face, Katetsu said, well, it appears that Naruto defeated both Guy and his pupil in a race. For a while, they stood there attempting to understand the new generation that Konoha had produced. The Yamanaka flower shop. While en route to training ground 15, Naruto noticed Ino watering the flowers outside her family's storefront. Oh hey Ino, Naruto said with joy. Oh Naruto hey, Ino said in response, her voice a little startled. With a hint of surprise in her voice, Ino asked, what are you doing here? Naruto answered, I was going to go and train when I saw you here. As Naruto had never struck up a conversation with Ino before, she inquired, oh okay. Do you need something Naruto? Just wanted to tell you to meet me at training ground 15 along with your team just before lunchtime if you guys aren't too busy. Still owe you guys 2 dinners, Naruto said with a grin. Given Naruto's situation, Ino said, oh sure we'll be there, though hope you have enough money. Choji doesn't hold back when it comes to free meals, laughing a little. Before sprinting away and yelling the final line, Naruto remarked, nah, I have more than enough. Well, cheers, Ino. I got to go, see you at lunch. After waving goodbye, Ino went into her family's store. Naruto spent the remainder of the morning practicing her strength and fitness skills, which included walking up and down a waterfall twice. She went to take a quick break under a tree to try to cool herself down because this exercise had worn her out quite a bit. Sakura arrived a few minutes late and approached Naruto in a filthy manner. Sakura was filthy, sweating, scratched, and had some fresh bruises. Her clothing was severely ruined. As soon as Naruto saw her, she hurried to Sakura, her eyes full of worry. Wondering if someone had the audacity to harm her best friend, Naruto said, Oi Sakura-chan, what happened? Are you okay? Sakura tried to calm Naruto by waving her hands and saying, I'm okay, Naruto, and nothing happened. Sakura's face was darkly flushed as she angrily retorted, that damn crazy snake lady is mad. Damn hentai sadist is worse than Kakashi. The peculiar, slightly arousing odor only served to further perplex Naruto, who was already somewhat perplexed. Naruto asked bewilderedly, Wah? You mean Anko? And what's that strange smell that's making me feel a bit funny? It's kind of a pleasant smell though, before uttering the final sentence aloud. Sakura blushed so much in the last part that you could see smoke escaping from her ears. Sakura responded, Anko's training is ridiculous. And there is no way I'm going to answer that. You all a damn bunch of perverts. Before yelling out the final sentence, her blushing color somehow intensifying. Huh? I don't understand, said Naruto, looking perplexed. I'm going clean myself up a bit down by the waterfall, Sakura said, huffing before making her way to the river. Sakura left, still bewildered, but Naruto dismissed it and sat down again beneath the tree. After 10 minutes or so, Sakura came back, looking much better and wearing new clothes. Do you feel better? Naruto inquired as well, pointing out that the peculiar odor had vanished. Sakura smiled and said, yay, much better, before taking a seat beside Naruto. What took place that left you feeling so defeated and angry? Naruto inquired somewhat worriedly. Just the instruction I received from Anko Sensei. After saying, I'll never see Cat and dinner the same way again, Sakura blushed and muttered the final sentence. After hearing the final section, Naruto was interested in Sakura's meaning and inquired, what do you mean by that? And what's the connection between dinner and cats? Is she some sort of cat eater? Up until today, I had the same thought. I hope Anko doesn't discover you by yourself. Hentai. Sensei, damn you. Sakura blushed as she answered, unable to meet Naruto's gaze. Fortunately, Sakura was spared more questions when Team 10 showed up, which caused some confusion for Sakura. "Hey everyone." With the rest of Team 10 following her, Ino cheerfully greeted Sakura and Naruto while waving. Naruto and Sakura stood up and approached them. "Hey Ino, glad you guys could come," Naruto said in return. "Ino, what has brought you and your group here?" Sakura inquired bewilderedly. Shikamaru answered, "That's what I would like to know," which caused Ino to smile and turn to face him. "Troublesome women," Shikamaru sighed in disapproval of Ino's actions. "I requested that we meet here." Rubbing the back of her head, Naruto answered, "I still kind of owe them 2 barbecue outings." Yada. At the prospect of receiving free food, Choji yelled joyfully, and Shikamaru shook his head and grinned. "I wanted to know when you would make the payment. I'm starting to suspect that you won't fulfill your commitment," Asuma smirked. Naruto pointed a finger at Asuma while maintaining a serious expression. "Hey, I always keep my promises and I never go back on my words, Dabbeo," she said. "Oh, Naruto? Am I overlooking something here?" Sakura inquired bewilderedly. He gave her a, "You got that right," look in return. "Only that tips from Asuma. Sensei aren't free," Naruto said, sticking her tongue out at him. Sakura shrugged and mentally noted who she should not ask for advice, but then she realized something. "Naruto. What happened to Jiraiya? Sama?" Sakura inquired, beginning to become a little alarmed at his absence. "What? I'm not sure where Sakura is taking this," Naruto said. "Oh, Arrow. Sennin told me what to do for the day and then said he went off to do research." Sakura said, "That's a relief," with a somewhat relieved expression. "Sakura? A little perplexed?" Naruto inquired. Sakura sheepishly resorted to saying, "N.no, it's nothing, don't mind me, he," which truly confused Naruto. After saying, "Well, come on, you have an outing to get to," Sakura abruptly shifted the subject and began urging Naruto on. Naruto simply dismissed Sakura's odd behavior and let herself be pushed out of the training area. Not long after leaving the area, Naruto heard someone prodding her tails, and when she turned around, she saw that Ino was entirely preoccupied with her tails and was prodding them several times. Ino?" Naruto inquired, finding the jabs and slights bothersome. "How does it feel to own these, and why do you own multiples? The only animal or creature that possesses multiple species is the Biju, which has 5. Hold on, do you have 6 tails? I assumed you had 5. Before noticing Naruto's extra tail, Ino rambled on. This clearly caught Shikamaru's and Choji's attention, and they immediately questioned whether they had counted incorrectly. "Go more slowly," Naruto responded. "You're asking too many things at once," after swatting Ino's hand away from her tail with one of her tails, which caused Ino to give a soft yelp. "To answer your question, not sure what it's like to have tails," Naruto responded. "One doesn't give their individual limbs and their experiences with them much thought." As she moved each tail independently and showed off her control over them, Naruto went on, "I can do things with them. My control over them is quite advanced compared to others that have tails. Why do I have multiple ones? Although the number of tails does indicate a person's strength and power, the more tails, the stronger a Hanyu is. I'm not sure if this is a characteristic of being a Hanyu. Therefore, as I gain strength, more will grow until I have 9 in total," Naruto explains, appearing to be thinking about whether or not all Hanyu will have multiple tails. "Are you a Hanyu by birth?" After considering what Naruto had said, Shikamaru inquired. Not really, I'll explain all of what I know after the finals when we are all together," Naruto said with some hesitation and anxiety. Knowing how difficult this subject is for Naruto, Sakura gave her a reassuring shoulder squeeze and smiled softly. Naruto turned to face Sakura, who was still pushing her a little, and gave her a small thank you smile while putting a tail around Sakura. However, what Naruto had said gave Shikamaru a mental shock. "I see," Shikamaru said, reflecting on how much more problematic this has gotten. Next to a dining establishment, since Asuma had just left the group with a rather flimsy excuse, Ino was currently wearing a rather mischievous grin, while Shikamaru was mumbling and complaining with an irritated expression. Sakura and Naruto were both quite perplexed and gave Ino a curious glance. Ino responded with a dreamy, smug expression. "Oh, it's nothing much, just a certain someone found themselves wrapped around a darling flower," she said. Sakura quickly understood what she meant and blushed a little, while Naruto became even more perplexed. "What? If he can wrap himself around it, it must be a pretty large flower, but why would he do that?" With a somewhat serious and perplexed expression, Naruto asked, to which all of her friends simply laughed at her while sporting big drops of perspiration. Ino said flatly. Wow, says the one that is almost in the same situation, doesn't have a clue, in response. How do I have a flower wrapped around me? When Naruto realized that Ino was speaking to her, she responded. How can someone as stupid as Sakura find someone like him, or anyone at all? With a tiny tick mark on her forehead, Ino answered. Sakura said, wish I knew, really wish I knew, her eye twitching slightly. Huh, now I'm really confused, Naruto uttered, still attempting to make sense of the situation. Sakura said, don't worry, Naruto. You might understand someday, as she shook her head. Choji stopped in front of the restaurant and mentioned, well, as interesting as this is, here is the place Asuma takes us often for barbecues, with a hint of drool. Sakura and Naruto came to a halt and turned to head for the door. A table for 5 please, Naruto said to the man outside the eatery. No, was the man's venomous response after he gave Naruto a brief glance. Naruto staggered a little as her friends gave him stern looks. What and why? Naruto asked, recognizing the expression in his eyes with ease. Using the same bitter tone, the man replied, your kind isn't welcome, now scram before we start losing business. Ino said, now excuse me, mister. What the hell do you mean by, your kind, with a slightly raised voice, clearly annoyed. That's exactly what it is. She is not welcome, but the rest of you are. You should follow my advice and avoid her as much as you can. The man answered, staying around this filth will not bring anything good. After hearing what this man had to say, Naruto's ears and tails fell in sorrow, and Sakura's heart ached. Naruto had partially shared her life with her and Sasuke, but seeing it for herself is entirely different from hearing about it. Ino, who was unaware of this, was incensed at how someone could say such things so casually. Choji said dryly, what a way to lose your appetite, and Shikamaru scowled. You asshole, now listen here. What gives you the authority to say that? In any case, what did she do to you? You had to have earned it if she did do something. I haven't seen anyone care for others as much as she has, Ino retorted quickly in rage, she is the nicest and kindest person I know. You, girl, don't realize what she did. Right now, all you see and hear are lies, and it appears that she has already taken hold of you all. The man growled, leave her before you die. Why you? I'm going to. Ino yelled angrily as she fled to assault the man. Before she could do any more damage, Naruto swiftly caught hold of her. He is not worth it, Ino, please. Still holding Ino and attempting to soothe her, Naruto begged, we'll just find another place. When Shikamaru noticed that Ino wasn't relaxing, he approached her, placed his hand on her shoulder, and said, Ino, stop, you have done enough, in a harsh voice that Ino hardly ever heard. Shikamaru. After turning to face him, Ino said. Shikamaru simply shook his head. After noticing that Ino had calmed down, Naruto let her go, and she simply huffed angrily before rushing off with nowhere to go. Back on the practice field, the group returned to the training ground where they had discovered Naruto after a furious Ino, and everyone found a tree to sit under, with the exception of Ino, who was pacing back and forth while wearing a deep frown. Naruto said, please just let it be, Ino, it's not a big deal, but an irate Ino interrupted him. Leave it alone. Not much of a deal. How are you able to say that? Ino quickly responded. Naruto grimly answered, I'm used to it and it's not the first time it happens nor will it be the last. What makes you accustomed to that? How can you allow them to abuse you like this? After all of that, how are you still able to smile? How? What gives you the strength? Ino asked quickly before slowing down and partially apologizing toward the end as tears began to fall. Ino fiercely returned Naruto's embrace after he approached her slowly and gave her a hug. You'd be surprised how quickly one gets used to it, and trying to stop them only made things worse, Naruto replied to Ino, smiling softly. Giving up is not an option in a situation like that. Your only options are to put on a smile or give up. It was enough to know that at least one person out there saw me for who I am. Sakura put her hands on Ino's shoulders, and Shikamaru and Choji both put a comforting hand on Naruto. Shikamaru mutely reflected. A lot of what Dad and Asuma, Sensei, said now makes sense. You will have to pardon us. Choji and I have an important task to complete. After a few minutes of silence, Shikamaru said, can't speak for Ino, though. Choji and Shikamaru both left the girls alone. The three of them talked and gossiped, but Ino and Sakura did most of the talking. Naruto mostly left Ino and Sakura to catch up because this had been her idea, using the lunch outing to help patch up their long-lost friendship, and she was happy that it still seemed to be working despite the scene at that restaurant. Ino had a pretty good idea of what her teammates were going to do. but she chose to stay until Sakura and Naruto would resume their training. The fact that Sakura and Ino were actually smiling and occasionally laughing made Naruto even happier. Unfortunately, everything must come to an end, especially when a puff of smoke suddenly materializes in front of them, frightening them all to no end. The three of them immediately leapt to their feet, unsure of what to expect. Anko was not one of the many things that could have been predicted from the puff of smoke. "Are you Pinky-chan? You're not attempting to stop training at this point. If you were Anko," she asked in a tone that suggested a lot of laughter and fun. When Ino and Naruto heard Sakura's new nickname, they both couldn't help but snort, which made Sakura blush with shame and mild annoyance. "Do you have to call me that, sensei?" Sakura pouted as she sang. "That name will remain with you until you finish my training, as I previously stated. Suck it up, Pinky-chan. You still have a long way to go before you've finished my training," Anko said, grinning slyly. Knowing that she will be stuck with the name for a lot longer than her training regimen with Anko, Sakura simply complained in mild annoyance. Before leaving, Ino greeted them with a giggle and said, "Cheers Naruto, Pinky-chan, have fun." Sakura moaned goodbye and then shot Anko a frustrated glance. Anko simply grinned back before snatching Sakura's shoulder and vanishing in a flurry of foliage. Later that night, the afternoon was what had drained her, as she had spent the entire afternoon attempting to master the first step in her Rasengan training. Jiraiya had raised the gravity and resistance seal levels because she had gained strength and endurance from receiving a new tail, but Naruto sighed, feeling quite exhausted from today's training. While Jiraiya had managed to pop the balloon with 2 hands, Naruto wanted to be able to do it with 1 hand, which proved to be challenging because she isn't entirely sure how to randomize her chakra flow with 1 hand. When she asked Jiraiya, all she received was a smile and a "figure it out for yourself" response. When Naruto asked what her dad had to do, Jiraiya simply replied that she would have to wait and find out when he returned, which only heightened her curiosity about what her dad was up to. She had already set aside a few clones to read over the book her dad had given her on seals, but he wasn't there to supervise. Even though Naruto was glad that her father was doing something, she claimed that she didn't get to go with him or at least spend a day with him because he wouldn't be able to live for long. Despite her desire to be self-centered and keep her father by her side, she was unable to keep her mother, whoever she may be, waiting and alone wherever she is in the afterlife. Naruto had many questions, and now that she had a chance that no other orphan will get, she really wanted to ask her father them. The one thing she genuinely wished for was to be able to see her mother. She had always wondered what she was like, what color her hair and eyes were, did they have a similar ramen addiction, what caused her to fall in love with her father, and what her parents were like. With her mind still on her mother, the one person she truly wanted to see, Naruto quietly crawled into bed. Her dreams were full of her mother's personality, but they also made her realize that she would never be able to meet her mother in person until the day she passed away. After 5 days, training ground 15. The past 5 days have become routine. Training with Jiraiya in the mornings, running or hunting shortly after sunrise, lunching with Sakura, sometimes with Team Asuma present, Rasengan and sealing training in the afternoon, and Naruto crawling into bed, rinse and repeat. It's currently around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, according to Naruto, who was taking a brief break and still trying to figure out how to randomize her chakra flow. After mastering her K's no Yoroi, her chakra always rotated anti-clockwise, and she quickly realized that she might need to practice it again in order to incorporate her 6th tail. Naruto then resumed her in-depth thought process about how to randomize her chakra flow. Being lifted off the ground and placed on someone's shoulders interrupted her thoughts, and her initial annoyance at the abrupt interruption soon turned to joy when she realized whose shoulders she was sitting on. 2.san. With excitement, Naruto cried out, "Hey, Naru-chan." Her father smiled as broadly as Naruto's in response. Minato would do anything to ensure that Naruto's smile persisted because he loved seeing his daughter's lovely smile, which seemed to light up everything around her. "You're back, 2.san. You went where? What were you doing? Why did you spend so much time away?" After saying this with joy, Naruto hurriedly asked her father a number of questions. "Whoa, that's amazing. Before we get into all of that, can't a father simply greet his little girl and spend some time with her?" Minato answered, looking a little worn out and wondering where she gets her energy from. "Hey, I'm not small. Despite being the smallest of the 9 rookies," Naruto responded. Minato answered, "You'll always be my little girl," in a soft voice that was as warm as he could make it. Minato smiled softly at Naruto, and although her expression was one of childish annoyance, Her eyes showed gratitude in a way that made Minato regret leaving her with her parents. Minato wondered if there was a way to return to Naruto that which she had lost. In response, Naruto puffed and pouted, but she still blushed deeply, feeling the warmth and love coming from her father. On the inside, Naruto was bouncing around with happiness. Father and daughter vanished in a flash of yellow as he decided to make the most of his remaining time. Hokage monument on top of the Sandame's head, facing the village, Minato and Naruto both emerged. Minato began quietly, recalling a few things from his past. I used to come here a lot when I had to think, get away from people, or just for the sake of coming here, it began. Like you, I didn't know my parents, and Jiraiya Sensei was the only father I found after joining my genin team. I felt like an outsider because I was a prodigy and had unusually yellow hair, even though it wasn't that different from the Yamanakas, so I kept to myself most of the time. Naruto continued to watch over the village while listening intently to a once.in. A lifetime story. My quiet and calm demeanor along with my OCD for being tidy and neat led people to believe that I was unreliable and girly, Minato continued softly. In fact, when I first met your mother, she said that to me. Minato chuckled and said, she totally threw out the statement that I didn't have what it takes to be a ninja. The idea that her father was girly, as he put it, made Naruto laugh. She ran her fingers through her father's unnaturally wild hair and was struck by how clean and tidy he was. His clothes were spotless and free of crinkle marks, and his hair, despite its wilder nature, was as neat as it could be. Not a single stray loose or split end could be found, which kind of irritated Naruto. Although she didn't spend hours upon hours on her hair, she still made an effort to keep it tidy where and when she could. I discovered this place very quickly during my academy years. If you want to be alone and don't want anyone to find you, this place is surprisingly ideal. After a brief pause, Minato added, it's also a good place to keep an eye on the village for anything that can and may happen. I felt calmer, especially on Sandame. Sama's head. Appropriately, as I considered him a hero and am thankful that he helped shape Jiraiya Sensei into the man he is now. Minato found himself saying the final line out of the blue. To be honest, he never thought about why he preferred sitting on this head to the first two Hokages. When I arrived, I found that sitting on top of your head was the most tranquil. Although I've only been here once since I became a kunoichi, I used to come here every day after my day at the academy before I graduated. Naruto, who was pleasantly surprised that her father would also visit when necessary, remarked, I always felt familiar and safe here, and now I know why. Naruto, wanting to stay in touch with her father, sat on his lap and wrapped her tails around him after Minato put her down and sat down with his legs crossed. 2.San. How did Ka.San come across? Naruto inquired with some hesitation. Her name was Kushina Uzumaki. She moved here when she was around 8 years old, although she was born in Uzushiogakure no Sato. She was fortunate to relocate at that time because her hometown was destroyed a few months later, Minato stated calmly. Why and by whom was the village destroyed? Astonished by the destruction of her ancestral home village, Naruto inquired. Kirigakure, Iwagakure, and Kumogakure forged a coalition to demolish Uzushiogakure shortly before the Second War began. There was no seal master as famous as the Uzumakis. They were destroyed out of fear, Minato explained piteously. Naruto genuinely pondered the strength of her ancestors and was amazed that it took 3 villages to defeat Uzushiogakure. Return to your mother, then. You both look a lot like one another. You resemble her almost exactly. The only major difference is that she had a much shorter and more violent temper than you do. But when you want to be, you can both be just as scary, Minato said, revealing Kushina. At the end, there was a little apprehensive laughter. Am I frightening? Naruto questioned, not thinking she was that frightening. Minato laughed nervously and scratched the back of his head in response. Yay, and just as oblivious and dense as she was, he said. Being called oblivious and dense made Naruto sigh a little, but she's not that dense, is she? Sakura, Ino, and her father all seemed to think so. She was a little proud of her ability to put people in their proper place, so to speak. Minato continued, recalling all the times he took Kushina out for ramen and the tears he shed when he realized how quickly his wallet had run out. As to who is the worst addiction when it comes to ramen, not entirely sure who takes the cake between you two, he said. Minato sincerely hopes that Konoha won't be the scene of another ramen monster's rampage and silently apologizes to Sasuke for being the next one in charge of keeping the monster in check. Here, keep this, Minato said, pulling out a photo of him and Kushina when she was a few months pregnant. Naruto's attention was drawn to her mother's long, straight red hair that flowed on forever, but she also noticed her mother's green, slightly large eyes and a very bright, large smile on her face. The picture also showed her mother's stomach, which had a slight bump on it, being held by both her father and mother. Naruto exclaimed, "Wow, her hair is so beautiful," with a hint of jealousy. "Yes, that is. I was drawn to her because of her hair." With a note of melancholy in his voice, Minato said softly, "I thought her hair was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even though others teased and bullied her because of it." Minato returned the hug with equal ferocity, struggling to contain his tears, but Naruto, sensing the sadness in his voice, turned around in his lap and gave him a fierce hug, holding on for dear life, fearing that if she let go, she would lose him forever. "I had only one lovely thing to genuinely appreciate for a very long time. You became the most beautiful treasure I've ever had the pleasure of seeing when I first saw you," Minato said softly as she tightened her embrace. "I sincerely apologize for my actions. I apologize for removing your mother from your life. I apologize for putting you through so much hardship. I apologize for not giving you the opportunity to experience a mother and father's love." Minato expressed sincere regret for not being able to find a way to keep them all alive and in Naruto's life, saying, "I apologize for not being the father that I should have been." Naruto's voice faltered with emotion as she whispered, "Thank you to San," and she didn't say anything more for fear of losing both herself and her voice. Whether or not her father knew or realized, this conversation between them put a lot of Naruto's nightmares and anxieties to rest, and they both remained that way for a while, savoring this unique moment that they might never get to experience again. Naruto broke the long silence with a soft voice, saying, "I forgive you, to San. Therefore, please find it in your heart to forgive yourself as well as to accept my forgiveness." Her father said, "Thank you, Naruto, thank you," in a low voice. After 10 minutes or so of comfortable silence, Minato noticed that Naruto had fallen asleep, undoubtedly exhausted emotionally. He slowly and carefully got up, holding Naruto, and then he looked up at the sky, realizing that they had both been there all afternoon and evening, with the sun having set hours earlier and the surrounding area dark. A flash of yellow that hasn't been seen in 14 years would have been visible to anyone looking up at the Hokage monument. Kakashi's apartment with Naruto. As soon as the flash appeared, it disappeared, revealing Minato holding Naruto in his arms, embracing him tightly even though she was asleep. Minato carried Naruto discreetly to her room and then gently tucked her into bed, grinning at the sight of her daughter sleeping soundly in front of him before leaning down to kiss her forehead. Naruto muttered something softly and then snuggled deeply into her bed with a slight smile on her face. Minato, not wanting to leave her for the night, decided to stay and went to Kakashi's bed to spend the night there. He didn't quite make it there because he was exhausted from his own emotional roller coaster, but he was drawn to the bed's coziness and warmth and managed to get himself fully on it. When the apartment door suddenly knocked, neither Naruto nor her father slept for more than a few hours. They both hurriedly got out of their rooms and met each other, and Naruto nodded as she walked toward the door, prepared for anything, unsure of what to anticipate. When she reached the door, she peered through the hole in the door to try to identify the person, but all she saw was her teammate's distinctively pink face. Naruto wondered who in the world would be knocking on her door at this hour of the night, and whoever it was knocked again just before she reached the door herself. "Sakura?" asked Naruto, bewildered. She was even more perplexed when she opened the door and saw Sakura standing in front of it, red-eyed and with tears streaming down her cheek. The large bag, which was nearly as tall as Naruto, beside Sakura, helped to ease Naruto's mounting bewilderment. "Sakura?"
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.